but any, obviously, gunshots near the White House, you automatically jump to the conclusion that it could be political violence. But as Hillary was saying, I think we're in a place in America where we're incredibly divided. Too many people only hang out with people who already agree with them 100% politically. We're broken into political tribes where there are less cross-partisan friendships, and as Hillary was saying, even less cross-partisan family bonds, because once you start to disagree about something, you get so angry and you break apart. And I think as Americans, we really need to get beyond this, because there's so much more that unites us as Americans than divides us. Hillary and I met each other through this panel. We're constantly put against each other to debate, but we've become good friends despite that, and I hope more Americans can do the same.
I certainly concur with you there. Yeah, I think I say that all the time here in Britain, as well as we see more of that sort of culture coming over here to the UK as well. I say we should all be able to disagree without violence. It's very, very important that we remember that. Look, I just want to bring you the latest from CNN here. They're reporting 2 people have been shot in an encounter with Secret Service near the White House on Saturday, according to a law enforcement official. The incident occurred near the intersection of Pennsylvania Avenue and 17th Street Northwest. The law enforcement official said officers from the Secret Service Uniform Division responded to a report of a person firing a weapon when the incident took place. Hillary, I'll come back to you and your thoughts on that one. Look, we don't know any more, of course, that's what we know for now, but we do know that 2 people have been shot.
Well, obviously, if they were shot, they were the ones firing shots. What we did hear was it was something like 30 shots, and we could hear them when they rang out with that reporter there. They obviously in that didn't really say if there was any ethnicity or any, religious. They didn't make any comments there. We don't know that yet. But as I mentioned earlier, one thing that does happen in the US, as soon as there's information, and I've always noticed this contrast between here and the UK, that usually we get information as soon as it is possible. And maybe it could be something to do with this administration, but I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know how long we're going to be here tonight. Mally and I have already discussed if we have to stay till 1 again. We're US time, we're ready to, but we may well hear this evening, because they do release things as quickly as they're able to. And I think a lot of times that's to clear up any doubt and any speculation, and for things spiraling actually out of control.
Yeah, indeed. And Mally, at least we know that the FBI and Secret Service there have responded in very, very quick time. I mean, you're just seeing the reaction from the moments that anchor there for ABC, I believe, or CNN, I can't remember which channel she was from, but as soon as she saw her duck, we saw the ABC, thank you, Hillary. As soon as she saw her ducking there, we saw the reaction from the Secret Service. Let's just take a look at one other moment, and I'll get your thoughts on that too.
Memorial Day since 2022. President Trump promises the prices will go down, but his grip on Republican support on Capitol Hill is weakening.
There's shots fired. We have to get down. Shots. There are shots fired. We are going down.
Yeah, we might be there. We'll talk to you. Go down. Okay.
I'm here. There are shots fired.
Get inside. Go. Get in.
Get up! Move! Inside!
All right, let's cross to GB News' chief US correspondent, Ben Leo, who is at the White House. Ben, tell us more.
Alex, hello, thank you. Just managed to run down here. Thank you for taking over the show as well. We understand, I've been speaking to some law enforcement agents down here. Obviously they want to remain unnamed, but there are suggestions that a gunman approached the west area of the White House. We're here on Pennsylvania Avenue, so if you can just see but just below the road here, this roadblock, there are a bunch of Secret Service cars, police cars, ambulances came past as well. Apparently just down here, which is the west entrance to the White House, where the press enter, the likes of me and Bev and I rather, enter via the White House. Apparently around 6 p.m. a gunman approached the entrance area to the White House. He didn't gain access to the perimeter and reportedly let off some gunfire. That in response sparks multiple Secret Service agents returning fire, and that's why we had around 20 to 30, as you can hear from those extraordinary videos that we showed a bit earlier, 20 to 30 shots fired out in response. We understand from unconfirmed reports that one person is unconscious and not breathing, and there was another separate second person involved who apparently is alive. And again, this is all unconfirmed because it's so fresh, but apparently a bystander, a civilian who just happened to be in the area as well, was struck by gunfire. This comes just 24 hours, Alex, after I reported on the Late Show last night, breaking news from the New York Post, that Ivanka Trump, the president's daughter, was subject of a planned assassination attempt at her Florida home. It comes around, 4 weeks after the White House Correspondents' Dinner here in Washington, D.C., where President Trump was subject to his third assassination attempt. And that comes, of course, after maybe the most serious assassination attempt of all in Butler, Pennsylvania in 2024 during the election, where, by the grace of God, the president, Donald Trump at the time, was escaped with his life after getting shot in the ear, but turning his head at the very last moment. There's no indication just yet as to who the gunman or the gunmen were targeting at this incident. We do understand from law enforcement sources down here that shots were fired into the White House vicinity, but nobody gained access, of course, because it is so strictly guarded by Secret Service. And if I can just get my cameraman to pan here to Secret Service agents congregating at this roadblock. There's 5 of them there, machine guns in arms. There's a second roadblock just up the road as well. You can't get within 300 feet of the White House. All the roads are now blocked, and this is a high security operation. And Alex, the extraordinary video you've been showing a bit earlier, I think it was ABC's Selena Wang, who was delivering a live report from the White House in what's called Pebble Beach. It's a row of media tents where each media organization has a little pod to do their live reports into studios. She dived for cover after hearing those gunshots, and as I said, 20 to 30 gunshots rained out. The majority of those, Alex, I can tell you, were return fire from Secret Service. I did ask one of these Secret Service agents you were just had eyes on just there whether somebody had died, whether there were any fatalities. He wouldn't say, but he did give a sort of a nod, or a wry smile, I guess is the word, to kind of say that possibly somebody had, but he couldn't tell me. But all this is unconfirmed so far, Alex, but what we do know is gunshots have rained out. There were potentially 2 people involved in a shooting near the west entrance of the White House, and more information as I get it.
Well, Ben, we do have a couple of bits of information to bring you, which you may have missed on your way down there, that we do know 2 people have been shot. So we do know that there has been a couple of people, casualties there. We don't know how serious, we don't know if they've died, we don't know any more than that, but we do know there are confirmed reports from CNN, at least, that 2 people have been shot at the scene there. I guess the question many people will be writing and asking tonight is, do you feel safe in Washington, D.C.? Is this do you feel it's the political atmosphere that's causing this, or is this just something that Americans have to live with?
To the first question, do I feel safe in Washington? I did. My perception of safety is that, yes, I do generally feel safe, although the past couple of weeks, I'd say the past 4 weeks, there's been a definite shift in the atmosphere, not necessarily politically related. Yes, the Washington Correspondents' Dinner was politically motivated, we understand thus far. The chap is still going through court, but you may be familiar with the story that I think the FBI are just turning up now behind me. You might be able to see them come in when they walk past. But there was, so I'm just trying to see who these agents are here. Is that FBI? I think they are FBI, so the FBI are just turning up. There was a shooting outside my apartments in Washington about 2 weeks ago, where I was woken up in the morning, 2, 3 in the morning, where there were 6 gunshots outside my apartment. It woke me from my slumber, and it turned out some guy got shot in the face. And then we had the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and now this incident now. I did feel safe in Washington, although the stats and the data suggest that Washington is far more unsafe in terms of murders and homicides than, say, London. So that's just my real-world perception. The data says otherwise, that London is far safer and Washington is a more dangerous place. But the political atmosphere hasn't really changed in recent years, has it? Not since President Trump was subject to his first assassination attempt in Pennsylvania. We thought then maybe that the rhetoric would calm down, people would stop throwing around language such as Nazi and Hitler and so on. Then Charlie Kirk, of course, was slaughtered in broad daylight in Utah in September 2025. His 1-year anniversary of his death is coming up. But again, that really didn't do much, Alex, to sort of quell the febrile atmosphere in America when it comes to politics. And I think the Iran war as well, the assassination, or the planned assassination attempts on Ivanka Trump, which was revealed yesterday, the chap who the FBI arrested in Turkey on May the 18th, so that was last week. They extradited him to the US a couple of days ago. He was an IRGC trained operative. He's an Iranian-Iraqi terrorist responsible and linked to many terror attacks all across the world, including, Alex, recently, the 2 Jews who were stabbed in London in April. This guy was planning to assassinate Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, her husband, and he was, according to the Department of Justice, who revealed yesterday that he was an IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps operative. So you have to say that the Iran conflict, which the president embarks on February the 28th, whether you agree with the conflicts or not, it has sparked an uprising in potentially IRGC-linked activity. And the situation we had in
just
London.
Very briefly, Ben, if you don't mind, we've got a breaking line just to bring in here. The gunman is being reported here. The gunman has been shot and taken to hospital. A law enforcement official has said. Authorities said the suspect approached a checkpoint near the White House and started firing at officers. Just to bring that to you, Ben.
Yes, thank you. That kind of corroborates what we've been hearing at the scene, where there was reportedly, as I said, 2 people involved. But if you're saying there's 1 gunman, maybe another one will crop up in reports imminently. We were told down here that there were no fatalities as of yet, just that 1 person, maybe the gunman you're referring to, was unconscious but breathing. And as I just sprinted down here from the Washington studio for GBNews, it takes about 10 minutes to run down here. There were multiple ambulances coming out of this roadblock where I'm positioned now, so perhaps the gunman was in one of those ambulances. But just behind me, there is still plenty of police and emergency service activity. The FBI behind me, Secret Service with machine guns in hand. And just going back to the previous topic, Alex, about the IRGC-linked activity, yeah, there definitely is a noted uptick in threats and attacks, you have to say, since the Iran conflict kicked off on February the 28th.
Yeah, indeed. Ben, just to say, audience here, you know, very brave of you to be down there. I can imagine the scene. It must be quite terrifying. We don't have to deal with this sort of stuff in London at all. So I thank you very much for bringing us those live images there. Ben, we'll come back to you very shortly. We do have someone else joining us down the line now. Ben, stay with us, and hopefully we can bring you some more live scenes and updates on this breaking story. We just don't know where it's going to go. But joining me now is Editor-in-Chief at the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari. Lisa, thank you very much for taking the time out to join us on such short notice. Lisa, what do you make of this? You must have seen the footage now that's clearly going viral online of the ABC anchor ducking for cover. Of course, now we're hearing reports that the gunman has been shot but is on their way to hospital. We don't know their condition. What's your take on this story?
I've been victim to this kind of political violence for way too long, so this hits home very much personally because of the coverage I do with counterterrorism. I've had death threats against me my entire career, and to see this actually play out in real time so many times during President Trump's presidency, and more recently, for anybody who doesn't agree with certain policies to pick up a gun. And I know we will have conversations in the coming hours and days about these specifics of this case. Obviously, there will be mental illness, because who would do such a thing other than somebody who does suffer from mental illness? But what radicalizes, what motivates somebody to pick up a weapon and do such a thing with a president or an administration or a political line that they don't agree with? I know this is a lot of speculation, but what we do know is that the temperature in this country has gone way off the charts in terms of how we deal with our political adversaries, how we deal with the other side. I mean, growing up, it was, if your politician, your candidate didn't win, you wait 4 years, and you would watch your parents go to the polls again in 4 years. You would look forward to the opportunity where you got to vote, and then you vote for the candidate of your choice. This is not what we're dealing with right now. I remember Donald Trump had an interview with Elon Musk when he was just running for the second term, and he said, the enemy within is greater than the Russias and the Chinas, and that means a lot. I mean, we're watching this in real time, that the enemy within is, right now we're on the cusp of figuring out what to do with the Iran threat, the regime threat, which is a deadly homeland security threat to us. We have so many other threats to deal with borders, with so many other issues, and now to have to stop on a Saturday night. I'm watching Ben as he ran over to this as well. For so many of us, we feel like we are in the line of fire as well, because we give coverage to certain issues, because they look at us as the purveyors of that political point, that they want to silence us and they want to intimidate us. This is terrorism as well, regardless of where it's coming from. It could be coming from the left, it could be coming from the far right, it could be coming from the Iran regime. We don't know. It's all speculation. But what we do know is that we do have a major issue in this country in how we deal with these issues and how we will deal with this going forward.
Yeah, Lisa, you've touched on quite a pertinent issue, haven't you, which is the political climate in America. And, of course, one thing we don't really recognise here in the United Kingdom, talking to our British audience at the moment, is that we don't see this level of political violence played out in such a powerful way. When you've got a weapon, a gun, like a gun, you can take someone's life very quickly. Right. We saw Donald Trump saved by the grace of God, frankly, by turning his head just at the right moment, at the right time, which, of course, then grazed his ear. But, of course, following on from that, just a year later, we saw the assassination of Charlie Kirk, an innocent man just debating people on at a university campus. What is the political climate like? And many people are writing in saying, is this the left? Is this the left not liking Trump's rhetoric? Is it rhetoric that's the problem? What do you think, Lisa?
It could be, but you know what? I also blame the media in this country that has divided the people so greatly, and that they don't report the facts. They report emotion. When you paint out the current president to be an actual threat and not a political figure, you're actually telling people that they would be doing the greatest deed if they would be able to take him out. I mean, what kind of narrative is that? What kind of rhetoric are they setting up to allow people to feel that they are now in the position of responsibility? Even we saw that with the last shooter at the Correspondents' Dinner, who actually felt he was a professional, he was a teacher, he was in a position to influence young people and their minds, and he actually felt, based on his manifesto, that he was in a position to do something that was great for his generation. I mean, it's mind-boggling. People are only dealing with the set of facts that they're being presented to in their column. That means their social media algorithm, their media of choice, their podcasts of choice, their influencers of choice, whatever they're presenting to them, that is what they believe. But what is so dangerous is that this is now disrespecting, this is threatening to the office of presidency. Doesn't matter if this is not your candidate, the next candidate may be your candidate, and he will have this, or she will have the same level of threats, because everybody has opponents. This is not how we deal with division or with discourse in this country. We have to figure out something better. But when you look at this, because I do cover a lot of in the Middle East, I cover a lot of narrative warfare. This is also narrative warfare at play. If you look at the places where narratives are able to enter, whether it is the media, government, school, K through 12, and university level, you have these paid actors here in positions where they're able to influence others and their opinions. And they are absolutely, it's working. It's working. When you look at Donald Trump as the enemy and not at Hamas or Hezbollah as the enemy, we have a major problem. He may not be the politician of your choice. This may not be the party of your choice, but this is still the greatest country on earth where you have freedoms where people in Gaza never have, when people in Iran are envious of, where people all throughout the world are envious of and are trying to get into this country. I mean, it's horrible. I mean, I'm the daughter of Iranian immigrants. My parents came to this country because of those freedoms. I have always been cognizant of those freedoms and what we have here. So to watch this, again, as somebody who has the FBI outside my home since the beginning of the Iran war, because of the level of threats that I receive, this really does hit home. We have to figure it out.
You're absolutely right, Lisa, and I speak to Iranian dissidents here in Britain. My stepfather's from Iran as well, so I sympathise with the situation you're dealing with, and it's a very worrying time for many people around the world. Thank you so much for joining me. That's Lisa Daftari, the editor-in-chief at the Foreign Desk. Let's go live back to Ben Leo. Ben, again, we're seeing a massive police presence there where you are. Tell us about the atmosphere in DC.
Yeah, it's on edge really at the moment because nobody's too clear what happened, but I have got some more information for you, Alex, which is that a gunman appeared to open fire on a Secret Service agent. So these agents surrounding the White House from every quarter, north, south, east and west. There's dozens of them at every entrance to the White House. And this guy opened fire on agents who were guarding the pavement entrance to the West Wing, which is the entrance where journalists normally enter to get inside the White House. Apparently the agent is okay, he's unharmed. It was unsuccessful, the shots fired at him, and I've just asked one of the agents whether their guy was okay, and they kind of gave a thumbs up. It appears that the Secret Service agent was evaluated at the scene. He was fine. 2 people, we understand, have been taken to hospital. One is the gunman himself, who was said to be in a critical condition, and the other, reportedly, unconfirmed as of yet, is an innocent bystander, just a civilian who was standing around the entrance to the White House at the time, to the West Wing. Yeah, so that's the latest we have so far here, Alex. But in terms of law enforcement, it's very busy indeed. We've had the DEA, which is the Drug Enforcement Agency, turn up, the Diplomatic Security Service, the DSS, alongside the Secret Service, and I believe the FBI as well. I think they call this, you wonder maybe why the Drug Enforcement Agency are here and the Diplomatic Security Service. Well, I think it's called something like mutual aid, where all law enforcement agencies within the vicinity at time of heightened security and an emergency, they'll all chip in and come down to the scene just to help out. So that's why you have the likes of the DEA, the DSS, the Secret Service, so many different law enforcement agencies here all helping each other out. But as I said, just to repeat myself, the Secret Service agent who was reportedly fired upon by this gunman is okay. We understand the shots missed him, and the gunman himself or herself is in a critical condition in hospital, alongside, by the way, an innocent bystander who we believe was shot as well in the crossfire. 20 to 30 shots, Alex, rained out, so it was a pretty hefty incident.
Indeed, Ben, and I guess we'll wait to hear more on the bystander, because of course your thoughts go out to them at the end of the day. They're just an innocent person walking on the street and they're caught in the middle of an act of violence outside the White House, Ben. What's the feeling amongst other reporters in the area? Because of course that footage that's really captured the world tonight is seeing Selena Wang, that ABC reporter, ducking for her life as 30 or so gunshots fire out there, because not only was it just her who we've just seen on the screen, but just a few weeks ago we saw the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where again the press were terrified. Does this have a chilling effect on your ability to do your job?
Yeah, that extraordinary footage you've just mentioned from Selena Wang on ABC, you can hear very clearly the gunshots rain out, and they sound close by because it is very close. I'd estimate around 50 feet. And if you were to fire shots from the corner of the pavement entrance towards the White House, the first kind of target, is it the Eisenhower building? The first kind of target is those tents. They're called, it's the media tents on Pebble Beach, where Selena Wang from ABC was reporting. So I don't think I'm over-egging it by saying that if he fired shots from where the gunman was taken down and opened fire himself, I think they could have easily reached those media tents. We don't know who the gunman was targeting, aside from the Secret Service agents, or what his ultimate goal was. Was he trying to get into the West Wing pavements and then indeed into the White House? I mean, lofty ambitions if that was his idea. But it's very feasible that he could have shot bullets towards the media tents where Selina Wang was reporting and where you saw from that video. So I'm not surprised they reacted, the ABC News team, as they did, taking cover in such a dramatic way. I would have done the same thing.
And this all comes off the back of course, Donald Trump recently posting on Truth Social that a deal is nigh for between Iran, the Iranian regime, and the United States of America on reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Do you have any suspicions at all that the IRGC is still heavily involved, given that you were telling us just not that long ago, Ben, that Ivanka Trump was, of course, at the centre of a suspected attempt to kidnap and assassinate her by an IRGC sleeper cells in America?
Well, it's funny timing, isn't it? Because we reported yesterday on the Late Show Live on GBNews how the American authorities had arrested a Iraqi-Iranian terrorist behind a spate of different attacks all across the West. He was responsible for the bombing of New York bank Mellon in Amsterdam in recent times. He was linked as well to the two Jews who were stabbed in London some weeks ago, and he was arrested and extradited from Turkey because the Americans found out he was planning an assassination attempt on Ivanka Trump, the president's daughter, and indeed her husband Jared Kushner, who is President Trump's peace envoy, who routinely goes to the likes of Israel, Gaza, Ukraine, Russia and so on, and Iran as well, Pakistan, to try and negotiate peace deals. So this guy was threatening to murder Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, and it was revealed yesterday by the Department of Justice that he was an IRGC trained operative, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is it's the big point from President Trump, isn't it, with this Iran war? This is partly, aside from the uranium as well, the nuclear capabilities of Iran and the IRGC, it is the IRGC subsidiaries running riot all across the West. We had MI5 in recent months saying they'd foiled 20 IRGC-linked terror attacks in London or the UK alone. They also have the proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis as well. So the IRGC is a massive problem. And again, I hate to make this political, but it does beg the question why this Labour government, Keir Starmer, took so long to make the first step to prescribing the IRGC in the United Kingdom. They promised to do so many times when they're in opposition. We played clips on our show, on the Late Show Live, of the likes of Yvette Cooper, David Lammy taking to the dispatch box in Parliament and accusing the Tories of dragging their feet at the time, this was in 23 and 24, for not prescribing the IRGC. Now, look, we don't know if this incident here at the White House is IRGC linked, but it does come 24 hours after the Department of Justice said Ivanka Trump had been targeted by an IRGC-trained terrorist. And it comes hours after President Trump said that they are close to achieving a deal with Iran in this conflict. So I'm sure we'll find out in the hours to come, Alex, who or what entity was behind this shooting. But what I can tell you for now is that a Secret Service agent was subject to gunfire by a person. Multiple agents returned fire, 20 to 30 shots rained out, and the gunmen themselves are now in a critical condition in hospital. And indeed, one bystander is in hospital as well after being subject to crossfire.
All right, Ben, well, you stay safe there, and we'll come back to you very shortly for some more news on this very, very rapidly evolving story. Let's go back to the panel here in London. I'm joined by political commentator Claire Muldoon, Labour councillor Stuart Fawcett, and Conservative councillor Elliot Keck in the room with me. Claire, I'll start with you. Of course, we're now hearing more about this story. Incredible pace, actually, that Americans are given the information that they need to understand these stories, unlike here in the UK. But worrying nonetheless, and honestly, my thoughts really go out to that innocent bystander who was caught in the crossfire of all of this.
Collateral damage, at its worst, really. But we also know that Trump's son is getting married this weekend down in Palm Beach, and he's not attending. So this might be, in some way, not necessarily a planned attack per se, but one that is just, a reaction to something that's triggered something, to make this happen. And it's, it's so refreshing, in one hand, to see the swift response response of both the FBI and all the other teams that Ben told us are there, the Drug Enforcement Agency, everything to do with political and foreign office there, and the direction in which the shooter went, of course, into the West Wing, which, as Ben said, that's the access that him and Bev use regularly to get in terms of the media. And then, of course, Selena Wang from ABC standing in the media tent. You know, there's so many questions that still remain unanswered, obviously. And this is definitely a story that is unfolding currently in real time. But it's refreshing to see a country dealing with it so swiftly, unlike ours.
Yeah, and just a reminder, it was only an hour ago, while I was still on my last show, that this news was literally breaking, and we already know that the gunman has been shot, is being taken to hospital, and that we also believe a bystander has been shot and taken to hospital as well, that no agents have indeed suffered any casualties, as far as we know. Stuart, coming back to you on this, the fast-moving pace of this means that at least Americans have the information they need at the time to be able to understand what's going on, which I think is absolutely critical. It's not something we do here, but it will allay people's fears that there's not an active shooter still going around. People in DC will be able to at least breathe a sigh of relief for the time being, but it won't change the reality that there's been yet another shooting inside DC, right by the White House, where we just saw literally a few weeks ago an attempt again for a shooting. We don't know if they were targeting Donald Trump. I believe the manifesto says they were, but targeting the political the political environment of the time, targeting Donald Trump, targeting the Press Association's dinner there.
I think what's really important is clarity of information rather than just supply of it.
Yes.
Because you can cause as many issues and public concern through incorrect, irrationally judged supply of information to the media. I think what
we've seen that happen here in the UK to very serious detriment. We've seen that happen. Yes, exactly.
Nottingham.
It brings to mind immediate, doesn't it? And what that happens is massive amounts of speculation start. Americans have got the information they need really quickly.
But if you look as well here, what things emerged very piece by piece, piecemeal. Obviously it's good news that Secret Service agents and law enforcement officers are safe and well. But let's look at some of the other elements of this. We now know that somebody approached the gate, fired shots, and there was obviously a very robust reply, as you might expect. Because of the fact that if there is any extremism in America, the means are different. So if you talk about extremism or you talk about warfare, you always try and defeat your enemy's will to win. But with extremists, you're never going to do that. You need to take away their means. And obviously, this individual or individuals, as yet unclear, their means are to be able to access a firearm, which isn't as easy here. Just want to pick up on something that Claire said there about response. Hasn't always been the case. I think the response to the synagogue attack in Manchester was actually exemplary by Manchester Police. It's awful that this is happening in the UK. You've heard me comment on it many times. But I think there is a very credible rapid response force by various police forces across the UK. What you're seeing different here is the fact, as you can see, from various different agencies, federal agencies as well, is that there is more of a unified response because of where it is. You'll have the Secret Service, which its primary role is to protect the President and the Executive.
I don't know where you got the information from that I said that we didn't have a rapid response in terms of policing.
No, you just said we don't often see this.
I said we do not get the response enabled through journalism, through reporting. That's what I said.
That's what you've said.
Nothing at all about the police response.
But I think what's important, as I said earlier,
and you
is
can't
to make
argue
sure
that because that's fact.
I'd be very careful on saying what's fact and what isn't. But I think what's really, as I said earlier, is clarity of information, not just fast supply of it.
Yeah, OK, well, let me bring Elliot Keck in. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, Elliot. You're a Conservative councillor here in the UK.
For this patch, actually.
Well, there you go, right, there you go. And funnily enough, I mean, this patch here is very close to Westminster. It would be the equivalent of being a councillor in DC, basically, right, and seeing a crime like this take place. The question, of course, everyone is thinking about, right, and immediately when something like this happens, we don't know. We can't make any assumptions about what the shooter's intentions were, but we do know someone has opened fire at the gates near the White House. I can assume that either person is either severely unwell or they're politically motivated. There can only be one of those two options in my head. However, Elliot, we're going on the backdrop here of the most divisive time in politics, not just in America, but here in the UK, in the West in general. We're pulling ourselves apart, aren't we? We're polarised people.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, on the flow of information, I think obviously there's a balance to be struck, but in the social media age in which speculation is rife, I think speed of information is absolutely critical. As information comes in, it does need to be released to the public. It's one thing 10, 15, 20 years ago where maybe you could control the information a little bit more. You could wait until you have all your ducks in a row.
And it was put in paper.
Exactly. But everything goes on Twitter long before you've got all your ducks in a row and you're able to issue the detailed press release in the press conference. I do personally prefer this way of presenting information in the current modern social media age. But listen, it's very difficult scenes. I have a great affinity with America. My wife is an American woman. But, you know, I think these are moments where it's a reminder that although America sometimes feels incredibly familiar to us, we've seen, you know, you think the way we consume our culture is mostly through American television and American film. But times like this, it always makes me feel how different America is to this country in so many ways. Fortunately, we do not have a tradition of political violence in this country. You know, there are some shocking counterexamples of that, but in general we don't. Whereas if you think of, you know, the tradition of American history, it is, you know, littered with political assassinations and assassination attempts from Abraham Lincoln to John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King and assassination attempts now. And listen, this is just unfortunately a difficult part of the fabric of American political life.
Is it the consequence, Claire, of living in a democracy? Is that the reality that when you live in a place where you can, especially in America, you've got a First Amendment right to free speech, you can say whatever you want, right? You can't do that here. There are actually constraints on the free speech in this country, but you can go extra far in America, right? That's the reality. Is that the consequence of that?
No, I don't think democracy is a consequence of that at all. I think democracy now more than ever is needed, now more than ever. So we have that clarity. We have that freedom of both speech and thought, because what we're seeing in Starmer's Britain at the moment is the tightening of even thought. I mean, the woman who got arrested outside an abortion clinic for praying for the thought, you know. We've got, you know, so many disparate things happening in this country, and it starts at tertiary education level for me. It starts at these students coming in, they're not able to give their views positively about anything or negatively about anything else for fear of being cancelled, for fear of being targeted, for fear of being whatever. Even comedians are cancelled. This cancel culture in this country is ridiculous, right? And OK, we're not seeing the level of violence portrayed at our politicians, but that's because of, I don't know, because there's less of us here. You know, there's a myriad of reasons why this is not happening here, and thank God it's not. But democracy and America's freedom has to be held above all else, in my view, and it really has to continue. Yeah,
Stuart, do we I mean, listen, I've lived some time in the United States, spent some time in the United States of America, and never saw guns being fired in front of me, but it was in a quite a liberal state in Los Angeles. But I did hear gunshots, and I did see people tell me, lots of friends of mine tell me that one of their friends or so had been a victim of gun violence. Is that just part and parcel of living in that society, and you just have to get used to it?
I mean, I've spent extensive time out in the US, handle firearms. I was with their military quite extensively as well. They do have the right to have arms, and obviously that increases the means of... We obviously had Dunblane here, which changed our culture towards firearms overnight, almost. Whereas America, it's much more fundamental within their constitution in order to bear arms as part of the Second Amendment. So unfortunately, that is going to make things more part and parcel. In its relation to free speech there, I think it's really important to know that, yes, America does have really free speech laws to protect free speech, but it doesn't allow incitement. It does have laws against incitement to violence, which is really important to note. Where the UK probably has that step further is the incitement of hatred as well, or even to sort of, pardon the pun, but load the gun towards things that could cause harm to other people. And I think it's important that we don't say either is that we are two countries separated by a foreign language, realistically. And I think we often, I myself have forgotten that to my great error, quite frankly. I think that's where we have two very different nations there in our approach to free speech and our accountability for what we say. So we have a lot more restrictions on what media you can circulate and what it can say. America doesn't necessarily have the same thing, but they have more of a nature of debate around these subjects than perhaps you may get here because of that restriction. But of course, the other element is that there are a lot more firearms, so any type of violence can be escalated a great deal quicker.
Yes, indeed. All right, look, let me just bring you an update here. AP News reports here, the second person shot was a bystander, so we can confirm that from the AP News report that's just come in. And just to remind you of this breaking news tonight, if you're just joining us, 2 people have been shot in an encounter with Secret Service near the White House. A law enforcement official told CNN that officers from the Secret Service's uniform division responded to a report of a person firing a weapon when the incident took place. Well, it's understood that the other person shot, of course, is a bystander and has been taken to hospital. Indeed, it seems that both the shooter and the bystander have both been taken to hospital, so both haven't sustained, as far as we know, fatal wounds at this moment in time. Let's cross to GB News' chief correspondent in the United States, Ben Leo there. Ben, any updates your end?
Yes, Alex, thank you. Just that. So, well, the rain is pouring down here at outside the vicinity of the White House. The update I have is that the 2 people shot, as you just mentioned, one was the gunman who didn't hit a Secret Service agent he was aiming for, but the second person, as you have said, was a bystander. But unfortunately, at the moment, they are in a critical condition. The innocent bystander, the civilian, and indeed the gunman as well is in a critical condition. Additionally, I've just been joined now by a couple of tourists here from Boston, Massachusetts, here in DC. We've got Robin and Daniel. Hi guys, welcome back to GB News. We were talking off air a minute ago, Robin, about the sort of febrile political atmosphere here in the United States. Do you think it's got worse in recent months and years?
Yes, I think it's gotten worse, especially since Trump took office again. There's a lot of very angry people. They just want to, commit violence or say things against him. There's just a lot of deep anger.
Violence towards Trump, you think?
Yeah, towards Trump, and some people want, or they encourage it, and some do it, so it's all just a bad cycle.
And we've seen it non-stop. We had the Butler, Pennsylvania assassination attempt. We had one here in DC just a few weeks ago. Then of course the death of Charlie Kirk.
Right.
In your opinion, who is behind this wave of increasing attacks and threats, political violence? Daniel, any thoughts on that?
It's hard to say. I mean, it's just, I just feel like the whole atmosphere has gotten, upsetting to me because, there's just, because of all the violence, and it's scary to be in America right now when there's constantly a fear of attacks happening in cities all over the country.
But before this evening, how long had you been in DC on holiday?
Oh, we just got here today.
Do you feel safe here?
I do.
And generally in America, Daniel, do you feel safe still, as you did maybe say, I don't know, 5 years ago before President Trump was in office?
It's definitely gotten worse since he's been in office. There's no doubt. I mean, even things on social media, the way kind of AI is taken off, making, there's videos making fun of them. There's just a lot of misinformation going on that didn't happen before.
Right.
And it's just
yeah.
accelerated the problem.
There's this kind of sort of conversation or idea that, when people use such flagrant language such as Hitler or Nazi when describing their political adversaries, that kind of gives the green light to the thing we saw happen with Charlie Kirk, for example, where he was murdered in broad daylight just holding a microphone. What's your thoughts on the use of language that's thrown around?
Oh, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Trump's not Hitler. That's absolutely ridiculous. It's not true. And to use these, to compare him to these incredibly, dictator, violent people is just absurd. I mean, he's not at that level at all, and I think using those words makes people think it's okay to commit violence when it's never okay to commit violence. He's still a human.
Yeah.
So.
And I guess we saw that, Daniel, with the White House Correspondents' Dinner. The alleged shooter, just a few yards down the road, actually, had a manifesto calling the Trump administration a bunch of Nazis and so on. In Boston, where you're from, you're here on vacation. What's it like in terms of gun control, gun violence?
Well, Boston is a very liberal city, and so there's just amongst even my people, that I know, friends, people I know. It's just there's just a lot of there's more hate against him because of people on the left.
More hate against President Trump?
Yes.
Because of the left?
Because of that, yeah.
What are the laws in Boston? Can you open carry guns, or is it concealed carry? Is it quite strict?
No. Well, you can't conceal carry, you can't open carry. It is very strict. I mean, you need a gun license. You cannot be carrying in public.
There are growing calls from the left, indeed after incidents like this, or maybe where a school shooting, for example, for much stricter gun controls.
Oh, I think that's great, but people are going to get guns if they want to get guns. That's just the nature of criminals. They will get what they want and they will do what they want regardless. But yeah, I mean, stricter gun laws, I don't think it hurts. I don't think it's going to solve all our problems either.
Where do we go from here, Daniel, in terms of trying to get out of this sort of hole of political rhetoric and escalating violence and incidents? Because I've been here in DC since September, and there has now been, although I have the perception of safety here, I have heard and been involved in stories like this multiple times. Some guy got shot outside my apartment in the face 6 times the other morning.
Wow.
Where do we go from here in terms of the sort of political conversation and trying to temper the atmosphere? Do you think anything can ever be done? Because, I mean, my argument is that if it can't be done after Butler, Pennsylvania, or Charlie Kirk, what will it take? Will it ever get better?
I feel like there has to be security everywhere we go now, because that's, it's important. It makes everybody feel safe where they go, and it's like there's no way going back. It's only there's only going to be more security in the future.
Right.
I mean, and some people are just glued to their phones, and they're working from home, and they would rather just not even be out and about because
of violence.
Because of violence, yeah.
Wow. Guys, thank you very much. Daniel, Robin, appreciate it. Thank you very much. Alex, just before I come back to you, just to confirm again that the 2 people have been shot. One was the gunman who opened fire on a Secret Service agent. The gunman is in a critical condition, and the second person who has been taken to hospital was an innocent bystander who was caught up in the crossfire. Unfortunately for them, they are in a critical condition in hospital as well. Just behind me, the road is still blocked off. The law enforcement agencies in attendance are the DSS, the Diplomatic Security Service, the DEA, the Drug Administration Agency, and the FBI and the Secret Service. If you're wondering why all those sort of strange departments are here, for example, the Diplomatic Security Service it's called mutual aid. It's where law enforcement from all agencies come down when there's been a very serious incident, and they all chip in to make sure that the public and indeed their colleagues are safe. Alex.
Yes, thanks so much for being there at the scene, Ben. It's important to get that reaction from the public. And you can see quite a sombre tone. You really can. It feels like a very, very difficult environment for people, not just in Washington, D.C., but I'm sure across America. When they see scenes like this, it must really disturb them. Let's get some thoughts from D.C., shall we? We've got political commentator Hillary Fordwich and Democratic strategist Mally Smith in the studio there. Hillary, you've just heard there from 2 members of the public in D.C. It's difficult. People are really feeling like that America is becoming a more polarised and difficult place to live, and a more unsafe place to live. And as you hear the news of a bystander, which we can confirm from AP, has been shot, it can just be anybody, can't it?
Well, Alex, you're absolutely right, and I think she summarised it rather well. It is more polarised, and a lot of that actually does come from the media. I actually can remember years ago, CNN was considered at one juncture the news, and now, obviously, we all know it's known in the US as the Clinton News Network or the Communist News Network. I know Mally's going to disagree with me, but the media has become very polarised. There really isn't anything that's very much just in the centre anymore that I could even name. Bloomberg used to be somewhat, and then, of course, Michael Bloomberg gave $89 million to Democrat. So it's the media is very polarized, and that feeds into this. If I might just interject, Alex, if you don't mind, there was a little bit of news, though. As we heard from Ben, the streets there right around the White House, of course, are still shut, closed off, but the lockdown for all of D.C. has been lifted. Also, in addition to the agencies that he mentioned that were there, the ATF is also there, and that's tobacco and firearms. They're also down there, and that's because they all collaborate. And last but not least, a Secret Service agent, he has been taken to hospital as well, but that's viewed as precautionary, not that he's in severe condition. Now, to go back to your other question with regard to polarization in America, I actually had mentioned this earlier. I had a very dear friend from so many years ago, and for the first time ever with what was happening with ICE, she really sort of basically, verbally attacked me. I've never had that in my life before. Families have been falling out, dear friends have been falling out. You're hearing this across the nation. It's a national phenomenon here in the United States, but I love being on set with my, as I always call Mally, my favorite liberal.
Yeah, and hold your thoughts there, Mally, because we'll come back to you in just a moment's time. Of course, lots going on in Washington, D.C. There we can see live pictures, which we'll be bringing you the latest here on The Late Show Live. Yes, it is 1 a.m. in Britain and 8 p.m. in Washington, D.C. And breaking tonight, 2 people have been shot in an encounter with Secret Service near the White House. A law enforcement official told CNN that officers from the Secret Service's Uniform Division responded to a report of a person firing a weapon when the incident took place. Well, it's understood that the other person shot is believed to be the gunman and has been taken to hospital. Journalists were also ushered into the briefing room by Secret Service agents.
Memorial Day since 2022. President Trump promises the prices will go down, but his grip on Republican support on Capitol Hill is weakening.
There's shots fired. You have to get down. Shots. There are shots fired. You're going down.
Yeah, we might be there. We'll talk to you. Go down. Okay.
I'm here. There are shots fired.
Get inside. Go. Get in.
Get up! Move! Inside!
Yes, the shocking scenes there from outside the White House. Let's cross to GBNews' chief US correspondent, Ben Leo. Ben, tell us more about what's happening at the scene there just down the road from the White House.
Alex, thank you. Yes, it's 8 p.m. here in Washington, D.C. At around 6 p.m, we first heard reports of gunfire outside the west entrance to the White House grounds. It's the press entrance, actually, where Bev and I routinely, and indeed the world's media, walk onto the pavement and into sort of the West Wing area of the White House. We can tell you that a lone gunman so far is reportedly in a critical condition after opening fire on a Secret Service agent who was manning one of the security entrances to the pavement, which leads up to the press entrance. The gunman opened fire. The Secret Service agent has been taken to hospital as a precautionary measure. We understand they're going to be fine, but the gunman, who was on the receiving end of between 20 to 30 shots from Secret Service, multiple Secret Service agents, is in hospital in a critical condition. Unfortunately, sad news about an innocent bystander who was struck in the crossfire. They too are in a critical condition in hospital. No word as of yet about whether it's a man or a woman or their age, but unfortunately they are in hospital right now in a critical condition. We're outside the White House, maybe around 300 feet away from the main road, just off Pennsylvania Avenue. President Trump is in the White House this evening with a lot of his top cabinet and team. He had only just not too soon before the shooting took place been on a phone call with leaders from the Middle East, the likes of Jordan, Bahrain, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, with regards to the Iran situation. He'd been posting from the Oval Office about a pending deal that he was hopefully going to be striking with Iran to solve the conflict. Then, maybe sort of 30 minutes later, we heard the first reports of the shooting, and you saw there the extraordinary footage in the video from some of the world's leading broadcast media, the likes of Selena Wang from ABC, who was giving a live report when she heard the gunshots rain out, and in terror, you can see the sort of the fear on her face, the terror at the White House. She dives under a table, taking cover alongside her team. The shooting site, which was on the west entrance to the White House, isn't that far from the press entrance, as I said, and it is feasible that any shots fired towards the press area, they're sort of mini tents which line along so-called Pebble Beach outside the west wing of the White House, where each media organisation has a little plot to do their live broadcasts. It's very feasible that some of those shots could have reached those media tents if indeed that's where the gunman was aiming for. But until now, Alex, at the moment we have no detail on who the gunman is, what his motive was, who he was going after. But it does come 24 hours after the Department of Justice revealed that Ivanka Trump, President Trump's daughter, and her husband Jared Kushner, who is the president's peace envoy, was subject to a planned assassination attempt in Florida. The DOJ said yesterday that a Iraqi-Iranian terrorist who's responsible for a spate of attacks and attempted attacks all across the West in recent years, including the stabbing of 2 Jews in London some weeks ago, another bombing of the New York bank Mellon in Amsterdam as well. He was extradited from Turkey on May the 18th to the United States to face charges for attempting to assassinate Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump. The key detail here was that the DOJ said that guy was an IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, operative. Now, we don't know whether this incident tonight, the gunman who is in a critical condition, whether he has anything to do with the IRGC. It's unconfirmed yet. We know no details about who he is or his motive, but it is worth noting that this incident comes 24 hours after that, and indeed some weeks, how many weeks is it now, sort of 4, 5, 6 weeks after the White House Correspondents' Dinner shooting at the Hilton Hotel here in DC, just a few hundred yards down the road, where we had that guy, Cole Allen, who was a teacher who drove all across the country from California in a bid to try and assassinate, allegedly, President Trump. Extraordinary footage from that evening, and again, it comes after the likes of Butler, Pennsylvania, where President Trump was targeted in July 2024, and of course a second assassination attempt at his golf course in Palm Beach, Florida. Alex, for now, the law enforcement agencies, we have multiple agencies from across the board, the DEA, the FBI, the Diplomatic Security Service, all down here. There's a massive roadblock for blocks and blocks and blocks all around the White House. Nobody's getting close. The president is in the White House. Of course, he's safe. And all those journalists who were in the White House at the time reporting on the world's news, predominantly the Iran situation, they are still locked down in the White House as we speak. But for now, I can tell you the Secret Service agent has been taken to hospital. We understand he's going to be fine. The gunman is in a critical condition. And the bystander who was shot, the innocent bystander, they too are in a critical condition, Alex, in hospital.
Indeed, and Ben, while we've got you, we've got some breaking news to bring everyone listening and watching at home. A statement from the US Secret Service reads this: shortly after 6 p.m. Eastern Time on Saturday, an individual approached a Secret Service checkpoint in the area of 17th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest. A preliminary investigation indicates that as the individual approached, he removed a weapon from his bag and began firing at posted officers. Secret Service police officers returned fire, striking striking the suspect, who was transported to an area hospital where he later died. During the shooting, a bystander was also struck by gunfire. It remains unclear whether the bystander was struck by the suspect's initial gunfire or during the subsequent exchange of gunfire. No injuries were sustained by Secret Service personnel. The president was at the White House during the incident but was not impacted. The incident remains under investigation. So, Ben, it seems there's confirmation that the shooter indeed has died as a result of that return fire from agents.
Yeah, no surprise. I'd heard that down here moments ago. I didn't break it because it wasn't confirmed. But if you're subject to 20 to 30 rounds from multiple Secret Service agents, I don't think you're getting out of that alive. So no surprise to hear the gunman has died. I guess the big question from here on now is that who was this person? What was his motive? Was he going after President Trump? If that was his idea, it was, lofty ambitions is an understatement. I'd call it deluded, because there's no way you're getting even near the West Wing entrance from the corner here where the incident took place. But as the hours roll on, Alex, I suspect we'll get more detail on that. But it's a pretty anxious time here in Washington, D.C. We've had multiple shootings over recent weeks, not necessarily politically motivated, but I'll mention again, if any new viewers have just tuned in, I was woken up from my sleep in my apartment here in DC some weeks ago, 2, 3 in the morning, to 5 or 6 very loud gunshots directly outside my apartment. It turned out the next morning I went down there to have a look. There was a pool of dried blood on the floor. Some guy had been shot in the face 5 or 6 times. I never did find out how he was. A few weeks before that, I came back from presenting the Late Show Live on GBNews around 11 p.m, came out the metro station, and 5 minutes later I discovered on my phone that a man had been shot in the leg by a couple of juveniles. Again, not necessarily politically motivated, but it does feel like over the past couple of months at least, of course the White House Correspondents' Dinner as well, there is seemingly an increase for some reason in gun violence here in Washington, D.C. That said, I still feel pretty safe. You have Secret Service agents all over the place, day in, day out, especially in the vicinity of the White House. You've got the National Guard, controversial as they are to some on the left. I still don't understand why, but the National Guard are all over the city, especially outside metro stations. But I still feel pretty safe, but that doesn't excuse what we've seen this evening. We still don't know the motive. We don't know whether it is politically motivated, but the fact is it's come outside the White House. The gunman has taken aim at a Secret Service agent, and yeah, we can tell you now the gunman has died in hospital. The only remaining concern is the bystander who was shot, who is in a critical condition in hospital. We hope they are going to be okay, but we'll bring you more detail on that as we get it.
Yeah, thanks for being there for us, Ben. We'll come back to you very, very shortly. Let's get some reaction to that here from the panel in London. I'm joined by political commentator Claire Muldoon and Labour councillor Stuart Fawcett. Stuart, I'll start with you. It's disturbing, isn't it? It's always disturbing when we hear news of anyone being shot, let alone a poor innocent bystander. When criminals, or whoever this is, we don't know what their motivations are, goes out, tries to take someone's life or tries to intimidate people through political violence. There's very little sympathy for that, at least among well-minded people. But again, it's always collateral damage, isn't there, with these events in America?
There was a study some years ago now on the New York Police Department on how many rounds it fired and how many targets actually hit. And actually, the vast majority of rounds fired never actually hit their target, unfortunately. And of course, when you have potential soft targets around, yeah, the collateral damage is quite heartbreaking, really, when you think about it. And I think, you know, probably the intended casualty was a political one by the perpetrator in this case, and it happened to have been, you know, as you say, an innocent bystander. You know, I don't think there should be any blame necessarily attributed at law enforcement here. This is quite a charged environment. We've got someone who clearly wished to do harm from the information we're receiving, and they have to have a robust response.
Yeah, it seems when you listen now playing that clip back in context, you can sort of hear the gunshots being fired by the perpetrator, then the barrage barrage fired back by multiple agents, which is what we understand. Very unlikely anyone was going to survive a barrage of that many gunshots fired back at them. And Claire, this all comes on the back of such difficult, not only internal political times, but internationally difficult times. There's a war raging on in Iran, isn't there? There's the IRGC still active with sleeper cells across the country. It was just yesterday, as Ben was saying, that there was reports that Ivanka Trump was an attempt to assassinate, to be assassinated by the IRGC. It's not a good environment, is it?
No, it's completely and utterly politically charged, and it's humanly charged as well. So for this individual, one, we don't know who it was. We don't know if he was acting alone or if it was, regardless of the sex of the perpetrator, of the gunman. If he was acting alone, why he did it, what motivated him to do it. Was he part of a sleeper cell? Was he part of something else? And it's madness to think that he could have got into the White House in any event through the secret services that are there, the special forces that are there. It's just madness by all, as Ben said, lofty expectation. Yeah. I would agree with Ben and say it's absolute madness. And
as well, these poor Secret Service agents, they're doing their job. They sign up, and of course, those guarding the White House as well. They sign up. They know what they've got a difficult job to do. But you just don't expect a man randomly to come out, as we've seen reported now, pull out a bag and out of that a gun. This guy got the first shot. It's not a fair fight.
No, is there any fairness when it comes down to battle, especially with guns? I would say not. But they are doing their job, and it's refreshing again, I would say, that they have a quick, swift response, and they just went straight into survival mode and did their job, because they were there to protect the President of the United States.
And Stuart, just a few weeks, it was a month ago that the White House Correspondents' Dinner was taking place, and we saw the man who hasn't, Carl Thomas Allen, who has pleaded not guilty, by the way, to his crimes, attempts to get into that room and cause trouble, and at least try and cause serious harm to somebody. Do you feel that the world is on a knife's edge? I get the feeling, even here in Britain, we're just a spark away from things going seriously wrong, because people are so angry with politicians from all sides, whether you're left wing or right wing. There's anger towards them. Do you feel like there's going to be a moment in the future where this calms down? Because it seems to me that things are only getting more and more volatile.
I think what we have is a vast majority of our population who are quite reasoned people, who do not want chaos and who do not want violence. They want to be listened to in part of political discourse. I think what we also have at the same time is a much more extreme, fractured basis of people from all over the political spectrum who do not identify with genuine engagement at all, and they only see their means having a means to an end, essentially, and sometimes that is through violence or other ways of extremism. So no, I don't necessarily think we're on a point of like a tinderbox point. I don't believe that. I think what we need to do.
Can I tell you why I feel that way? We saw in San Diego the two young men who went and attacked a mosque and then took their own lives and shot themselves afterwards. Here in the UK and in America and across the West, synagogues constantly under attack, Jews walking down the street under attack. We see the President of the United States, twice someone's tried to assassinate him. Plus, you could attribute the White House Correspondents' Dinner for something similar. Perhaps there was another attempt there, who knows? And that's why I feel like we're on edge. It is the political, and I agree with you, it is the extreme wings. But I feel like those wings are becoming so radicalised that they've gone past the point of discussion. There's no talking them down.
And I think this is what you hit upon absolutely spot on there, is the psychology behind it and how these people are being made subjects of extremism, how they are becoming radicalised, essentially, whether it's through any media they consume, online. There is a lot of alternative, pretty dark media going on that is radicalising people now, and there is unfettered access to it. So I think that is happening on all different parts of the political spectrum, and these people are not being spotted early enough, and intervention sadly isn't happening.
Claire, is it social media that's driving this?
Well, it's not helping it. It's certainly inflaming it, because it gives a person facelessness. There's a lot of identities that are kept secret on social media, and it gives people the ability to say whatever they want, as you know, as sweary and as disastrous and as violent as they want. Yeah. And some aspects of social media are really quite violent, not only in language but in meaning and in temperament, and it's really difficult to rein that in. Yeah. And of course you've got the bots as well that are, you know, ferociously keyboard warriors, you know, typing away.
Yeah. On those bots, because we know Iran operate a massive... And Russia and China and all of our adversaries operate massive amounts of infiltration to social media networks. I see reports from the people who run X, for example, constantly saying they eliminate millions of bots, millions of them on a monthly basis. And it begs the question, doesn't it? How safe... I guess this is the age-old question, Claire. Yeah. Do you give up your security for more intrusive privacy, so the government know what you're doing, who's online, they can see a digital ID, that sort of stuff? Yeah. Or do you sacrifice that for less security?
Well, I'm not a proponent of digital ID at all. I would far rather the government did not have any controls, nor the NHS either. And companies like Palantir know an awful lot of information, and I would really rather that they didn't. And I don't like that aspect of it. I'm only on one social media, which is X. That's the only thing I'm on, and I'm quite frankly, I'm thinking of even coming off that. The kids now, as you know, get their news from TikTok. Yes, they're not on X. Instagram as well used to be like the haven, the nice place of social media, but since Meta has got together, Facebook, Insta, WhatsApp, you know, there's lots of them are all the same brand, and it's going to be a case of there's only going to be about 3 or 4 major players in the whole of Meta, and that for me is really worrying. Yeah,
and it's true as well, disinformation, misinformation. When I say that, I know people get very, very frustrated hearing those words, but it's a real thing now, because news...
And they don't know the difference between the two of them either.
And reports, I mean, I'm seeing it tonight as I'm looking at X, and reports of this coming in. I don't know what to believe, what not to believe, because there's people with what look like credible ticks against their name, reporting things that I think are completely untrue. Yeah. And of course, many people will see that as fact, and that is part of the problem, isn't it?
I think part of the issue is sort of the animosity caused around anonymity. So, as you say, not knowing which sources to trust when you're living in that echo chamber, essentially. You're not seeing people in person. We don't have the same cues and the ability, that sort of inherent ability to ascertain whether we believe that person, whether we can put trust in what they're saying, as you and I can do sat here when you're in that environment. But when it comes to things like social media, I know Claire mentioned things like digital ID there. We clearly do have an issue with misinformation, disinformation. There are malign powers that are trying to influence Western democracies. There's no two ways about it. And their weapon of choice is to try and use social media or other areas of influence on the internet to undermine it. And this isn't just to influence things one way, it's to undermine its integrity. Indeed. And obviously the democracies have to have a response to that, which completely kills its ability to do it.
And then, like I said, it goes back to that question, how much more power do you want to give governments? Right, let's go back to Ben Leo, who's got a breaking line for us. Ben.
Alex, thank you very much. Yes, just reading some breaking reports now suggesting that the White House shooter, who has now died, of course, he's deceased, the person who opened fire on Secret Service agents, he was reportedly known to the Secret Service before today's incident. There's no elaboration on what that means, but it is worth noting that on April the 17th, there was a gentleman who tried to gain access to the White House near the Treasury building entrance, which I believe, as far as I can recall off the top of my head, is the east side, where the new ballroom is being created. He was apprehended trying to scale a fence on April the 17th and taken into custody. There was no such shooting at the time. I don't know if this is related to that person on April the 17th who tried to gain access, but it is worth noting that that incident did happen. 2 weeks before that, there was another incident where a van tried to gain access and rammed into bollards. That guy was named and arrested as well, and later charged, I believe, with trying to gain unlawful entry. But tonight, just a few moments ago, it's being reported that the shooter, who has died off the back of 20 to 30 rounds being fired at him by the Secret Service, he was known, reportedly, to the Secret Service before tonight's shooting, Alex.
Ben, yeah, that's worrying developments when you hear things like that, isn't it? You wonder how they managed to get so close to the White House, indeed. Let's go back to our panel here in Washington, there in Washington, D.C., should I say. Political commentator Hillary Fordwich and Democratic strategist Mally Smith. Mally, I had to cut you off earlier on, I beg your pardon, so I'll start with you. Mally, we've had now quite a lot of information come through the line about what's taken place here. We now know that the gunman has indeed died, but we don't know much else other than that. What is your current reaction? You live in DC, I assume, Mally. How do you feel living in the capital city at this time?
Yeah, I mean, it is incredibly scary. I walk with my dog, and we'll sometimes go past the White House, circle back up, and then I'll head up to my apartment. So I've walked around the area where this shooting occurred, and if it was a different day, I easily could have been there. And that's something that, we always have to remember. There goes but the grace of God. You could easily be in one of these tragic situations. But I think the United States is dealing with two crises that interconnect. We first have a gun violence issue where 120 to 130 people die from gun violence a day. That averages out to about one gun death every 11 to 12 minutes. And a lot of that's suicide, but essentially gun violence touches every aspect of American life. You have school shootings, as you mentioned, Alex, you have the shooting at the mosque, you have shooting at religious areas like synagogues and churches. And then the other issue we have is a political polarization and a political radicalization that I believe is made much worse by the internet and social media. What you'll have is algorithms will feed you content that excites you, that interests you. So you can have people very quickly fall down a rabbit hole of extreme viewpoints just because they expressed interest in one post that was inflammatory, and then you get fed more and more inflammatory posts. And the difficult thing for the government on this is that these lone wolf shooters, they don't have connections to like traditional terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda. What they have is they're lonely, they're on the computer, and they just absorb themselves in hateful rhetoric and conspiracy theories, and that convinces them the only thing they can do to change their political situation or their personal situation is take a gun and unfortunately shoot people. And the combination of those two factors, Alex, is incredibly difficult because I don't know exactly how you regulate how people just fall into these disinformation and conspiracy theory loops on the internet. And then on the second part, the U.S. has passed different gun laws. I, as a Democrat, wish we would do more there, but it's also not easy because the United States is the only country that has more guns than people.
Yeah, well, I guess the question over to you then, Hillary, is off the back of what Mally was saying there. What does the country do? You're not going to come to any agreement, I would have thought, across the political spectrum that guns need to be removed from the United States of America. And even if you were to do that, it would be quite the tremendous effort to rid the country of guns. It's probably too far past that point, isn't it? What do you do? We're having this discussion here in London. Do you give up more control to the government so they can monitor who's on social media, what they're saying, the sort of people you might want to keep an eye on? Do you have more security cameras around embedded with artificial intelligence? You become like China? What is the answer here? Is the answer either do all those things and become more authoritarian and more constrained, or do you just put up with it?
Well, Alex, it's a great question without an answer, because if anybody had the answer, they would have done it already, right? So we don't have the exact answer. We even have, related to what Mally was saying with regard to Meta, there was a lawsuit recently actually suing Meta because a woman was saying that she got so addicted to it because of her mental state and what it was taking her down this rat hole. And my answer to that is, well, sugar's addictive, alcohol's addictive, and a lot of other things are addictive as well. So as to your question now with regard to the solution, first of all, there is no solution. I personally, and a lot of people have different feelings in terms of the government intrusion, and as you mentioned so aptly, becoming like China, becoming like a communist state. Now, don't forget, of course, in London, it was London that first started with all the TV cameras when the IRA was bombing London. That's when a lot of that started in London. London had to do that to prevent a lot of those bombings and or at least to surveil it. I think actually the root cause, and actually it's Princess Catherine that's really on this about childhood education and children. One time actually I was golfing with somebody who counseled in prisons. He'd counseled for 27 years, and I was a single mom raising kids alone. And I asked him what he thought was the key to, because he was counseling in prisons. And he said, you know, I have counseled in prisons for 27 years. He was very religious. He was doing religious. But he said there's one common characteristic of all criminals he's ever counseled. He said it wasn't religion, it wasn't gender, it wasn't race, it wasn't ethnocentric background, it wasn't socioeconomic level. It was one thing, every single convict. They didn't feel loved as a child. So I do think society needs to do more with children, because we've heard about parents, obviously, that are disengaged. It's not just broken households, because, of course, a broken household, you can have a grandmother taking care of a child. A lot of people, they have an aunt or somebody else. So it's just, you must feel loved. If society could actually fix that, now that's going back to the very beginning. It's not the Band-Aid approach, but I do know that Princess Catherine, that's something she's very much working on. Now, for the quick solutions, what should we do? The problem with gun control is we have the greatest amount of crimes here in the US conducted by guns in states where they have the tightest gun control, Alex. Why? Because, to the lady's point who was interviewed on the street by Ben earlier, those criminals are going to find a way to get guns anyway. So when there's gun controlled in a certain state or a certain location, the criminals manage to get them anyway. That's the biggest problem. So I don't think there's an easy answer. I wish I had it to give to you, I would do. But I do think societally, we've gone down a route of people not feeling loved, and that's one of the reasons we have so much, I think, criminality across the globe, not just here in the US.
Yeah, Mally, just to return to the sort of the timeline here, because I'm not making any suggestions, but it does. You do think about this war in Iran. You think about threats made to Ivanka Trump. You think about the statement released by Donald Trump not that long ago, declaring that there might be a breakthrough. Although we have heard that a few times, so you never know where that's going. IRGC sleeper cells. We've seen multiple arrests and interventions here made by our security services, and I'm sure that level is the same in the United States of America as well, Mally. Is it the case that we should be more wary of our foreign adversaries, perhaps, as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know until we get a sense of who this person is and if it was connected to Islamic terrorism or terrorism abroad, or just domestic radicalization, or just a crazy person who is off their meds, or a crazy person who thinks they're the second coming of Jesus and gets a gun. Like, it could be any of those things, really. But I will say, jumping off kind of what are things we could do, I do think there could be a way to work with social media companies to make the algorithms where they don't necessarily automatically so quickly shift you into the most extreme political and social content. And I'm definitely not talking like the free speech issues you guys have in the UK. As Ben knows and Hillary knows, I'm not a fan of what Keir Starmer does there. I'm not talking about bans. What I'm talking about is, when you have an algorithm, make sure the algorithm doesn't feed you these dopamine spikes of the worst content you could possibly find, and just moderate it a little bit, especially when it comes to political and social issues. And then the second thing I'd say is that, and this is just more generally on like what can you do and what can we do as American citizens to help with the political polarization, as I always remind people, try to get out of your information silo and try to read news or watch news that doesn't necessarily fit your predetermined bias. So, you know, I'm a Democrat, watch Fox. I'm a Democrat who goes on a lot of right-leaning stations, so I feel like I'm really living that one. But if you're in the UK, that means, you know, if you're watching the BBC all the time, go over to GBNews. If you're out in GBNews, watch the BBC a little bit, just so you are breaking out of your information silos and seeing how issues are being framed.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and it's always the reason why here, Mally, at GB News, we have different voices on. We platform people from all different political spectrums, because we believe that intrinsically you cannot have a free speech society without everybody in the room. We do not want to create echo chambers. It's very easy to go and sit in an echo chamber and hear what you want to hear, but it can be very difficult to hear things you don't like to hear. Right, you two, we'll be back with you very shortly. Go on, Hillary, you wanted to make a quick comment.
No, my quick comment was going to be Alex, but the BBC is taking the tax pounds from the Brits. They should actually be doing exactly what GB News is doing.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you there, Hillary. Certainly agree with you there. Let's cross back over to our chief US correspondent, Ben Leo, who is just meters from the White House. Ben, tell us more.
Alex, I got some breaking news for you, which may paint a slightly clearer picture as to the motive behind this gunman, who, of course, is now deceased. The Secret Service spokesperson has just told us that the gunman was an emotionally unstable person who had previously been given a so-called stay-away order from the White House. Now, that's pertinent to what I was saying maybe 10 minutes ago when I last spoke to you, that there was another incident at the White House on April the 17th where a guy tried to gain entry. He tried to clamber over one of the fences to gain access to the White House. The president was in the White House at the time of that incident, as he was tonight. We understand he's safe in the residence. And there was another incident before that April 17th incident where a van careered into one of the barriers and tried to gain entry as well. So the Secret Service moments ago saying that this person, the gunman who has now been shot and killed, was emotionally unstable and had previously been given a so-called stay-away order, ordered not to go near the White House again. So whether it's linked to that incident I previously mentioned on April the 17th, or perhaps the other one which came 2 weeks before that, we don't know just yet, but that may go some way to painting a slightly more clearer picture as to the motives. We were talking about, of course, was this to do with maybe Iran or the IRGC, but the latest, Alex, as I said, is that the Secret Service is saying this guy had previously tried to gain access to the White House. He'd been given a stay-away order, and he was described as emotionally unstable, Alex.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, that can mean many things emotionally unstable as well, can't it, Ben? We don't know whether there's any further motivations behind it, but please keep us posted if you do hear that news there, Ben. We're coming back here to London with our panel here. Claire, emotionally unstable is how they're describing this man. That's a common thing we hear, right? Even here in the UK when it comes to attacks.
Well, it is, because you have to be unstable, I'd say, mentally to do anything like that,
yes.
whether you're under duress doing it, or whether you're actually doing it of your own volition. It is not normal behaviour, and it really ought not to be treated as normal behaviour, and it has to be called out for what it is. Now, clearly there are people with mental health issues. Clearly there are people who are really, really mad and have got no consideration at all for what they do or for the consequences of what they do. This isn't the case, I don't think. You are taking a gun, you're using a gun, you've shot your gun for the point of either killing someone, harming someone, or getting into the White House to assassinate potentially the President of the United States. That is not normal. That is not normal human behaviour, of which we should be condoning.
No, absolutely right, Claire. Well said. And Stuart, emotionally unstable. I mean, we heard this about Valdo Calacane here in the UK, and of course, yes, he's a very unwell man mentally. It doesn't take away from the horrific act itself, does it? It doesn't make anyone feel any better. Emotionally unstable person coming up to God knows how those Secret Service agents weren't hit. I mean, God knows, thankfully the person clearly couldn't shoot a weapon.
Well, body armour probably as well. And
yeah, you might be right there, because we don't know whether anyone actually was hit with the bullet, but we know they weren't injured if they were. But we do know a bystander has lost their lives as a result of it. Emotional instability in 2026 is very different to what it might have been declared 15 years ago. You can be emotionally unstable for a variety of reasons, can't you? But particularly in America, I know there is a big drug problem. There's a very, very prolific drug problem across the United States. And again, it begs the question, is that yet another issue that faces the United States of America at this point in time?
Just to the first part of your observation there, which is about the law enforcement Secret Service agents that have had to tonight enact their inherent right to self-defence, and they've had to take a life to do it. What we often forget about these attacks is that they're often aimed at, or purported to be aimed at, politicians or those in positions of power, but it's often ordinary people who are serving their country that have to take these really difficult decisions and take the responsibility to act in their own defence and as part of a collective defence, as part of their duties. And I think we just need to note that here tonight, that law enforcement officials have had their lives put in danger, and they've had to take a really difficult decision from someone who we believe to be, as you say, unstable. Now, when you talk about things about people being unstable, we have a large and diverse society now, don't we, where people have the freedom and their own will to go and do whatever they want to go and do. We have limited powers, realistically, of surveillance on people who have been perhaps sectioned or perhaps who have been ill but not necessarily deemed a threat. So I think we need to look a lot more closely at how we follow up on those things and what monitoring we can do. But as you mentioned earlier, it's a balance between if we're going to risk any state overreach of surveillance upon people as opposed to how we're trying to protect the public more generally. What we do have here, and America is now progressing itself, is tighter background checks on people if they want to get a shotgun certificate or a firearm. It's very strict here. You can't have anything shorter. You can't have a concealed weapon, for example. You can't have a pistol. In America, they're increasing background checks. And as it was said earlier, actually what you probably want to promote is in its own sphere, in its own area, environment, whether it's UK or US, is legal gun ownership, because these people have been checked, as you say. However, as it was mentioned earlier, criminals don't go through those checks.
No.
So, you know, if people really want to do harm, I think their psyche has been penetrated so far that they are probably willing to do that, and that's a very difficult thing to legislate to prevent.
Certainly agree with you. Well, we've got another guest joining us now, geopolitical strategist Tawfiq Rahim. Thank you very much for joining me this evening. Yeah, the backdrop of all of this, of course, comes on the back of the President of the United States being at the White House working on a so-called peace deal or some kind of deal with the IRGC, the Iranian regime, and Gulf leaders to open up the Strait of Hormuz. That is the backdrop of all of this. It will be now somewhat overshadowed by this incident, of course, won't it?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the nature of the Trump presidency, from the campaign to even the administration. It's been this balancing of geopolitical files with all types of domestic tension. And so while this is quite dramatic, it's almost nothing new for Washington, but also for the president. And I think, as you may know, I wrote a book on President Trump, Trump 2.5, a primer, and I speak to some of the assassination, attempts in the campaign as really shaping the way he looks at his own governing approach and agenda.
Yeah, indeed. And what's your conclusion of that? What's your conclusion? How do incidents like this change a man? Because, of course, more recently, just a month ago, we had the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which is meant to be a very light-hearted, fun event. It's the first time Donald Trump was going to go back to it after so many years. And again, we see an active shooter there trying to take the lives of people, we assume. How does that affect somebody?
Well, definitely the first assassination attempt where he did get clipped in the ear, that was, I think, the one that had the most, instrumental effect. And then subsequently, as you remember, there was a second assassination attempt, on the silence of a golf course. And he seemed to brush that off. And I think what's happened, I mean, in some ways, after a year and a half, is he seems to have become accustomed to these attempts. You saw he wanted to go back out for the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And I'm assuming on this one, he sees it in that way. He's going to move forward. However, I think he takes note, people in the White House take note, and I think others, that there's a rising climate of political violence, political hostility, and it is often successful. We might see this one as the gunman died, but we can't forget that about, almost a year ago, Charlie Kirk was assassinated.
Yes.
And that was a successful attack. And Luis Mangione assassinated the United Health CEO, which is also in a way a politically motivated attack. So this is kind of a pattern, and I think we need to step back to say, what does this actually mean?
And for the United States of America, this sort of political violence is becoming so common now. It's becoming so common. And again, this man is supposedly mentally unstable, unwell. We don't know whether he has political motivations, but I always assume if you're targeting the White House, where the president, an elected political leader, resides, I always make the implication that it is political. Perhaps it isn't, but I seem to think that it is. And with these consequential events happening so quickly and rapidly after each other now, I don't think I've ever seen. We've always heard of attempts taken on the lives of political leaders, but not so many. Just there is a serious amount now, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's an uptick, and I think it's ahistorical for contemporary times. And I'll just make 2 points. So one is we often look at the mentally ill situation, we point to that, but I think it's a red herring because, radical violence often goes, hand in hand with individuals of this nature. They get drawn to it. The people who are recruiting get drawn to it. And we've kind of gotten accustomed to terrorist attacks where there's, wide organization and strategy. But that's not, historically, if we go back a little ways, how this happens. And on that point, in the 60s and 70s, we had a spate of attacks, including on political figures, including successful assassinations, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, RFK, his father, JFK, and then the Weather Underground movement, for example, the series of other types of violence that were going on. So I think we're heading, in a way back to that era. And there is a lot of popular backlash against elite figures that plays into this. And so I think it is a, general volatility that we might have to become accustomed to.
And is this, what do you think is causing this uptick? Is it rhetoric? Is it that the poorest in society are perhaps polarized themselves as to what they think the answers are to the political solutions and feel that they've got no choice? What's driving this?
Well, I think, you hate to justify anything like this, but we have to look at reasons like you mentioned and really assess them, because I think it's many, many things. Obviously, there are a series of people who are motivated. There's a lot of criminal elements out there, and they're taking advantage of the situation. They're taking advantage of, for example, the political polarization, which plays into this. And there's a lot of funding out there that create these environments for people to congregate. So that's definitely one aspect. But there is a general popular backlash on both the left and the right against elite figures, against political figures, against business elites, against the wealth inequality, and generally over the fact that the political process solves nothing. Even in the case of, President Trump, who played into a lot of populism, there are a lot of people who feel left out, who see kind of, let's say, a series of figures who have closed access to the White House. And so, there's a range of things, and I think they all contribute because there are different aspects of this political violence that are coming up to the surface. And when they do happen, and this is, I think, the scary thing, is a lot of people justify it. They support it. And people that, let's say, are 1 degree removed from me and you. And so I think that has to give us pause. Why is that happening? And we can't, dismiss everybody, because if that's a wide cross section, we got to figure this out and bring the temperature down and see if we can address solutions through the political process across countries, not just in the United States.
I certainly agree. It's certainly scenes that we see more and more commonly here as well, Tawfiq. Thank you so much for joining me this evening on this obviously developing story now. Let's get some more reaction from our panel in Washington. Hillary, I was just thinking as Tawfiq was talking there about the state of the United Kingdom. We are a fractured political environment now. We have gone from 2 parties to 4, 5, 6, who knows what's going to happen over the next few years, because there's always something that we've got to cater to everybody now. There's no unifying voice anymore. There's no unifying identity of Britain, particularly our politics. Is the same happening in America? Are you just seeing these fringe elements of your political spectrum just becoming so disenfranchised that actually they resort to violence?
Well, yes, and if I could just make a point there, Alex, I don't also think it's just the UK. This is happening across Europe. You're seeing a lot of dissatisfaction in this across Europe. Obviously, the Dutch government, I think that's one of the reasons that Mark Rutte, who's now heading up NATO, has been so successful in that role, because he had to lead a coalition government in the Netherlands. You look at what's happening in the Netherlands with all the immigrants, and in Spain they've just had mass protests trying to get their leftist leader out of office. So I think this is not just a UK issue. I think this is across Europe, and a lot of it is due to the infliction on Western culture and societies of all these, and I love to always use the word illegal immigrants, illegal migrants, because I'm an immigrant to the US but did it all legally. So I think that's been a big issue. I think that's something that's been really polarizing in society, because I think there's the same sentiment. That is one thing that's unified. The same sentiment is, where is this coming from? We didn't vote for it. Now back to your question with regard to the US. It's a bit different here. We really still are a two-party system. There is no no serious third party whatsoever that anybody can really point to. And anytime there was sort of like a third party run as an independent, like Ross Perot, what he really did was he at least pulled away from the Republicans. It's viewed very negatively here. So we don't have that same kind of, I would say, fractional parties that you do in the UK at the moment. Certainly we have no rising reform. I think it's more because obviously Nigel Farage is much more aligned with Donald Trump. So no, we don't have that here, but we do have the same kind of polarization, and obviously, as we're seeing tonight, the same kind of dramatic reactions in society. One last fact, if I could just add, I did learn that that shooter is 21. Don't know a lot more about him, but he is a 21-year-old.
There we go. Mally, I'll pass a similar question on to you off the back of what Hillary was discussing with me there, because illegal migration is the hottest topic in Western society. It's one of the leading policies of the Trump administration to remove illegals from the country using ICE, which has been, received by the left exceptionally unwell. We might put it perhaps very lightly there, but it has resulted in protesters dying. It's resulted in deaths. It's resulted in violence from ICE against people being violent towards them, perhaps. We're seeing here in the UK such little faith in the political establishment of the two-party system that actually two new parties, well, newish parties, have arisen from the ashes and are now eating that establishment alive. Mally, is it the case that actually American politics is broken? Is it just catering to such a small segment of society now that so many more people are disenfranchised?
Yeah, I mean, to jump off what you were saying about how the UK has had their main parties kind of disintegrate, and you've had new parties come from kind of the out of nowhere to be, real leaders. In the US, I think we would have seen something similar to that if our two-party system wasn't so strong. Literally, the laws in this country make it difficult for third parties to field candidates. So what you have is it forces folks to work within their parties to overthrow their party leadership and just take it over from the inside. But I believe if you had the rules like the UK had, you would have seen the Democratic Party split in two, where you would have had a more socialist wing and a more moderate wing. I think when Trump first started in 2016, you would have seen a more Mitt Romney, Republican, business-oriented split with a more nationalist party as well. But because of our laws, it prevents that. But what you were saying about why do people feel this discontent? I think there are two big reasons. One, as you said, is immigration. No matter how you feel about immigration, whether it was in the United States or in the UK, no one likes
illegal immigration.
Well, I was going to say no one likes the idea that people are breaking the rules or things seem out of control. I think one of the reasons that Trump started losing on immigration is that the ICE enforcement made that seem chaotic, so the chaos that was at the border seemed like was spreading into communities. But then the second thing is economic, which even though we have a growing economy in the US, Europe and the UK are like marginally growing, a lot of people don't feel like they're getting ahead. And it's even tougher for those folks when they can go on social media and see very easily either people they know or famous people living really rich lives, and they see all this wealth inequality. So
and they're seeing all the migrants get free housing, free food, free everything.
So I think the combination of those two things can create a lot of discontent.
And I'll put this back to you, Hillary, because talking about the fracturing of politics is, I think, that is part of the massive driving force behind all of this. When we look at the extremes, even here in the UK, there's extremes on both ends of the spectrum. What happens here in Britain is they find a party somehow to get involved with. I won't go into too much detail about which parties those are, but I think everyone watching from a UK audience will understand that. Is it because the MAGA movement is, let's just say, it's perhaps 30% of the American population, the MAGA movement, then you've got the 20% old school Republicans, then you've got the old school Democrats, the Clintons, then you've got the far left, the more radicals, the AOCs. You can't have a marriage, can you, that lasts like that? The church, what we found in the UK is the church was too broad and nobody was happy, hence why the desire for change is there, the rapid desire. And what's happened with the MAGA movement is that it is that rising from the ashes. It's taken over a party, but it might only be capturing a small segment of the population, perhaps.
Well, actually, I think the thing with MAGA, though, is it's very President Trump driven. I really am very interested to see what will happen when he's no longer in office and he's no longer leading it, because to your point, and as Mally was saying earlier, there are a lot of, and they're referred to in America, actually, they're referred to them as rhinos, Republican in name only, and there are many of those in the Republican Party. And yes, we've seen on the left, we see those that are extremely socialist, those that are backing, for example, Mayor Mandami in New York, those that are like the Elizabeth Warrens and the AOCs, who are literally not socialists, they're almost like leaning towards communism. So both sides of the aisle has factions within their own party. But now, directly to your point, like, I don't know whether MAGA is even going to exist, and MAGA Make America Great Again, after President Trump, because he's such a strong leader. Don't forget, we had the Tea Party movement, and that sort of fizzled in the US. Unless you have a very strong leader, a very strong proponent that can garner all that support, I don't know that you can have it. For example, even in the UK, I don't know how Reform would be doing if it wasn't for Nigel Farage. Look at UKIP. UKIP didn't have that charismatic leader. I think a lot of it is to do with the charismatic leader that drives the support for a party. That's a big, so it's individual. And Mally wants to say something. I can say.
Mally, I promise I will come back to you, but we're running out of time, so I'll be back with you guys very shortly. I'm going to get some live reaction here back in London. Sorry to interrupt you there, Mally, but we will come back to you. Yeah, Claire, illegal migration is actually, when you think about all of the political problems that are arising as a result of it, cultural factionalism, you've got the religious aspect of illegal migration, that puts pressure on extremes in our society, doesn't it? The poorest people in Britain, seeing people come over here, get free healthcare, free homes, free everything, right? The same in America. They've seen whole places, these sanctuary towns in the United States of America. But on the other side, on the spectrum of the left, they now see ICE rounding those people up, chucking them into the back of vans and getting them out of the country. That is going to radicalise the other half of America, right?
Of course it is, right? But ultimately, as the saying goes, when in Rome, OK, you have to assimilate and become part of the culture of the country in which you're living or you want to live in. I mean, Trump's was going to exercise, if you want a green card, you have to remove yourself from the US and apply for it outside of the US under, unless there's circumstantial things that you have to stay there for, if you're doing a job that you have to be required to do there, or you're of high net worth in your job, then you can apply for your green card that way. Immigration is a huge issue, and it's not going to go away until we can secure our borders. And this nonsense talk of wanting to rejoin the EU from Burnham-Metall, I think it flies in the face of people who voted for Brexit and have given no hope whatsoever to the people who perhaps voted Remain and now think, oh, here comes Barnum, here comes Starmer. They will want to take us back into the EU. Do you think the EU are going to make that easy for us?
Absolutely
Do you
not.
not think that they will make us join the euro as a currency? Will stop the Thatcher
dividend?
Yes, dividends, everything. They're going to make it really hard for us, whilst especially they're looking to bring in Ukraine. Turkey still wants to come into the European Union. It will be absolutely catastrophic.
Yep. Absolutely right. And Stuart, your thoughts on the polarisation of things, because I use illegal immigration as an example there, because when something so severe happens, and we're
but
just
it's all
years
over.
away.
Look at the rape, the child rape gangs.
Exactly that.
Nick Timothy's letter today to David Lammy.
Yeah, I was talking about it on my show. We've got a serious problem with Afghans in this country. We really do. We've got to say it, because when the Pakistani grooming gangs were going on, we couldn't say it was Pakistani grooming gangs. Well, I have said today, Afghans are a problem in Britain. These ones have come over into our country illegally, particularly, are a problem. And Stuart, the reason why I'm bringing this up is that it requires very, very difficult medicine to rectify it. You've now got hundreds of thousands of illegal migrants in the country here. One day there's going to be a government that comes along and goes, sorry, you've got to go. That is going to cause massive upsets in the United Kingdom. We already see political violence here picking up. You've seen what it's like in America. Donald Trump's already sort of shown the framework of what happens, the radicals come out and go, there is no way I'm tolerating that. You're evil, you're Hitler, you're neo-Nazis. As people have been calling people like Nigel Farage for a very long time, Nazi this, Nazi that, it ends up having this repercussion, doesn't it? When the medicine is off the other foot, you know, Conservatives here, I think, have actually put up with illegal immigration very, very soundly, might I say. Soundly. No violence in many parts, not always, but in many parts towards illegal migrants, whilst they're suffering quite a lot here. But if the left... If Nigel Farage, for example, if he was Prime Minister, starts deporting hundreds of thousands of illegal migrants, I believe there will be violence against politicians in this country. Are we just steps away from that being like that here?
So there's a few points to respond to there. I don't want any violence against politicians of any nature.
Of course, I'm not saying you do, by the way.
No, I know that. I think that's really important to note that is not acceptable behaviour and it is not a resolution to the issues that we face. You mentioned there as well about the issues with Afghan refugees, asylum seekers, however you want to classify them there. And I take those figures into account. It's clear there has been an issue when you look at that denominator there in offences. But I think it should also be noted that there were a lot of Afghans who worked with British forces quite bravely and at great personal risk that sadly didn't necessarily get the protection that they required. And those Afghans aren't a representation of all the Afghans that actually did work with the British forces and saved British service personnel's lives.
I certainly concur with that, just to be clear.
But I think there's something more broad and why I think issues like immigration really hit so hard, and it's about because of fairness, but primarily because of economic growth. We haven't had economic growth yet. In my adult lifetime, I don't think I've seen economic growth pretty much above 1%. So I think when resources are so scarce, when things are just tighter and tighter and tighter, and you're being told you can't have that aspiration isn't possible, people don't look up and look at what they can go and achieve because it's not feasible. What they do is they look around them and they look at other issues and they see things like the cost of illegal immigration, or they see the unfairness perhaps with open borders when they were in the European Union, or they see the unfairness perceived. So, for example, I voted to leave the European Union because I thought that it was getting too powerful, the democracy was getting too far away, and essentially the renegotiation wasn't serious enough. That was my outlook on it. I think there was a lot of issues there. So I think people look around at these issues, and if we had greater economic growth, if people were prospering, they would perhaps look at these issues in a slightly different light because it wouldn't have the impact upon them, the fairness impact, as you say. All these people are getting, free healthcare, they're getting accommodation, whereas I have to go out to work 40 or 50 hours a week to provide for my family, and my quality of life realistically is only going down. You know, look at tax thresholds, for example, that are frozen as inflation takes hit, problems with inflation. So I think that is the basis from which the animosity on these issues builds. So when you look at that in isolation, when you look at these issues in isolation, and by the way, most people now, you talk about the fracture in the political system, the vast majority of people now, when they come to casting their vote, it's often because of one issue. It boils down to one thing. And whether that party is for or against them on one thing, and that is how they cast their vote. So if you think they're looking at in the siloed nature of issues from their perspective, and broadly speaking, they're worse off each year, and they have been, for example, for me, my entire adult life, they look at other issues because the political environment, especially since austerity, has been, how can we cut things?
Yes, absolutely right. Listen, both of you, thank you very much. We're just approaching 2 a.m. here. I'll be handing this back over to Ben Leo live in Washington, D.C. to bring you more updates on this developing story.
Good morning. It's 2 a.m. in Britain and 9 p.m. in Washington, D.C. Breaking tonight, a suspected gunman has been shot and killed in an encounter with Secret Service near the White House. Another person, understood to be a bystander, has also been injured and is in a critical condition in hospital. Journalists were ushered into the briefing room in the West Wing by Secret Service agents. They were inside the White House grounds at the time of the shooting, and a statement from the US Secret Service reads, shortly after 6 p.m. Eastern Time on Saturday, an individual approached a Secret Service checkpoint. He removed a weapon from his bag and began firing at posted officers. Secret Service police officers returned fire, striking the suspect, who was transported to an area hospital where he later died. During the shooting, a bystander was also struck by gunfire. It remains unclear whether the bystander was struck by the suspect's initial gunfire or during the subsequent exchange of gunfire. No injuries were sustained by Secret Service personnel. The president was at the White House during the incident but was not impacted. The incident remains under investigation, says the Secret Service. This was the moment an ABC News journalist reporting live at the White House at the time was forced to duck for cover.
That President Trump has said a deal is close, only for the two sides to remain far apart.
Let's get the thoughts of my panel here in Washington, Hilary Fordwich and Maddie Smith. Good evening, guys. Good evening. Seen you so far. Been down to the White House.
I know. I heard you running out.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's being reported that the Secret Service were aware of this gunman tonight, the guy who has been shot and killed. He previously, on multiple occasions, tried to gain access to the White House, and they described him as emotionally disturbed, Hilary. So there was an incident on April the 17th where somebody, maybe not necessarily the same guy, but did try and gain access to the White House by clambering a fence. But this guy tonight, who has been killed, he was given a stay-away order.
Yes, and he was 21. That's what I did read also about this. And we were getting this all breaking news at the moment. We don't know much else, and what we were talking about earlier was that we're such a polarized nation. We were saying it's happening from all the social media feeds that actually encourage people to go down the rat hole that's something that's dramatic, and also obviously media. Media is very polarized here. Why is this individual deranged? We don't have information on that yet. All that we know definitely is that we are a society where people are taking to guns, doing this sort of thing, instead of, like Mally and me, we're both diametrically opposed on so many things, and yet we love each other's company and we can have a conversation. That's the way the world should be. And I really respect, and I'm not just here for GB News because I'm conservative and we're a conservative network. I'm here because I admire what GB News does. We have opposing views on set, and that's what we cover. And I wish there were more networks that would do that in a healthy, sensible manner, because maybe we wouldn't be feeding these kind of individuals.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, Mally, from Hilary there. I do watch lots of US cable news, and you don't really, I'm not going to use this incident to backslap GB News, but the way news is in America, you don't really get sort of the depth and breadth of different views on certain networks. They are very tribal, and I guess the late Charlie Kirk, it's worth mentioning him, of course. He was slaughtered in broad daylight with a microphone in his hand, but he famously said, and it's a clip that's gone viral, when people stop talking to each other, when husbands and wives stop talking, marriages fall apart, when nations stop talking, wars start, when you stop talking, that's when bad things happen.
Yeah, and I've seen that clip. It is powerful, and I would say that with the caveat, it sounds like this might not be political violence. This could just be a crazy guy who had a vendetta or just was off his meds, or there could be a political aspect. But regardless, this fact still remains that the U.S. is incredibly divided. We have seen an uptick in political violence. And you're right, Ben, the media in the U.S., they'll have opposing views. I do a lot of right-wing channels in the U.S., and liberal channels like CNN and MSNBC will have conservatives, but the U.S. laws aren't exactly like the U.K. laws that require more balance. The only reason that a U.S. station will have someone that has a different opinion is for conflict and for the debate. So literally, you could have a station just do 24/7 opinion and just say everything they dislike about their opponent. You could have Fox News get rid of Jessica Tarlov, and legally there isn't anything you can do about it.
So they'd have her just for the entertainment to have a row.
The only reason is entertainment. There are laws when it comes to candidates. If you have a candidate, sometimes you have to make sure you do equal time for another candidate. But broadly speaking, the only reason a U.S. channel has someone with a different opinion is to have the fight. And then that gets to a broader question of, are we having the best discussions in cable news, or are they manufacturing fights for views and clicks, and that might mean we're not having the best discussions.
Well, for the clickbait. But in the UK, we have Ofcom, which we don't have the same sort of thing here. But I will say that it doesn't really work because, again, the BBC is just so left-wing now, which it never was. When I was...
Also, the BBC mark their own homework. Any complaints go through the BBC first, and then if they can't come to sort of a resolution, it goes to Ofcom. This incident this evening, of course, comes 24 hours after it was revealed Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner were subject to
to an assassination plot.
Where he even had the blueprints to their property.
Yes, very chilling. A sort of Iranian-Iraqi terrorist who was trained by the IRGC. It comes weeks after the White House correspondent's dinner shooting as well. Can we do anything, Hillary, in this country to stop these kind of attempts and attacks, if indeed this isn't politically motivated tonight, and it's just some crazy guy? And I will say, as a Brit here living in DC since September, you do see lots of unfortunately mentally unwell people on the streets.
Yes, you do.
They are everywhere, more so I'd say than London.
And what's happened here is the reason we have them is because there was a policy basically to shut down a lot of the mental institutions where all of those people were originally used to be housed, and they've been shut down, and that's the reason that you're seeing them on the streets.
What can we do about that? I mean, nothing really, because it looks like suicide by cop. I mean, again, unconfirmed, but you are completely deluded and off your head if you think you're getting anywhere near the White House proper by unloading on a Secret Service agent on the corner of Lafayette. Was it Lafayette Park?
Yeah, you're at Lafayette Park. Yes, you're right. He has to be deluded, and you're right. Basically, it's a kamikaze trip. That's what it was. A suicide has to be, unless nobody's saying would do that unless if they wanted to get out of it alive. Now to your question about what can we do about this. Alex asked me the same question earlier. First of all, if anybody had the answer, they'd do it. So no one has the answer. But my opinion is it's something actually that I'd like to raise that Princess Catherine's trying to do in the UK, and that is with regard to early childhood education and early childhood, because, and I just mentioned it earlier, so I'll repeat again though, but I was a single mother raising my kids. I'll never forget, I was golfing with this man, and he was counseling in prisons. He happened to be very religious, but he said he was counseling in prisons. He said 100% of convicts he had counseled for 27 years. The one common characteristic, it wasn't race, it wasn't age, it wasn't gender, it wasn't family background, it wasn't ethnicity, it wasn't socioeconomic level. It was one thing. They did not feel loved as a child. Not necessarily even a father in the home. Didn't matter the family construct, they didn't feel loved. I think there's something very sad that's happened in our society. It's not just the polarization of media, it's not just the social apps. There's something's happened in our society where people don't feel so loved. But last but not least, but we can't feel that we're so it's so dramatic today, because think about the generation that did live through JFK's assassination, RFK's assassination, and Martin Luther King. So we've been seeing this for many, many years, including obviously Lincoln, and our society has been obviously violent for many, many years across the world too.
It's an interesting point about love, Hillary, and this won't be the kind of thing other news channels will be discussing off the back of this incident. But,
no. Are you going to start singing "All We Need Is Love"? Because Ben wants to sing. Ben is Mrs. Calling. He really wants to be a singer.
No, but I think it's an interesting point, and maybe something society should be focusing a bit more on. Because this week I wrote to a death row inmate called Andrew Lukehart, who's getting executed in Florida on June the 2nd. He, some years ago, decades ago, he's been on death row for 30 years actually. Wow. He murdered a 5-month-old baby. He tried to change the baby's nappy. He got angry because it wouldn't sit still. He struck the baby in the head and dumped the body in a river. He's getting executed in Florida on June the 2nd. Is that next week? I wrote to him this week to try and interview him for GBNews, because I'm keen to do a death penalty documentary looking at the debate around the death penalty. Should it return to the United Kingdom? Does it work? How do families feel? What does the Bible say about it? So on and so on. And I was looking into his background, and I was speaking about his background and the death penalty and the fact he was about to be executed with a family member. And I found out that look, and this isn't a call for sympathy, but it's more of an understanding about why a once innocent baby himself at some point probably
Let me guess that he wasn't loved.
Yeah, so he was his uncle, who he was pretty much his father and confidant, died at an early age. He was given alcohol and cannabis by the age of 8. His other uncle then sexually abused him before he was probably 14, 15. His sister then died when he was 19. Now look, doesn't excuse
I'm not excusing him.
What the guy did to earn his own death sentence.
It accounts for it.
But you can maybe understand, and it's from a lack of love.
And if I may, I just add, I think this was on GBNews. I don't know where I was just watching it. I was watching a Muslim extremist who is now working with, I think, authorities to help counter extremism. And he was talking about his childhood and how his parents became radicalized. And he was saying that, I think it was a Taliban offshoot, and he was talking about his childhood. And this is something ghastly, but for our viewers, he had a teddy bear, like a lot of children do. They have teddy bears, and you have a favorite toy. And his mother would give him this teddy bear, and you got very, very, very close. And one day his mother, who was very radicalized, asked him for the teddy bear. Ready? She took the teddy bear and a very huge pair of scissors and decapitated the teddy bear right in front of him. I think that was on GBNews, and that accounts for exactly what we're talking about.
Mally, quick word. Tammy on your say has said, no, hug a hoodie doesn't work. There was a scheme or a conversation in the UK during the David Cameron years about hugging hoodies and giving them sympathy. Hoodies as in thugs or antisocial people.
Well, I'm glad you explained that to me, because I wouldn't have known what that meant. But
somebody who wears a hoodie, basically.
Yeah.
She says, every child born in the 70s Britain were victims of child abuse by today's standards. We didn't feel loved, so we gave love ourselves to our kids, but schools radicalised them.
Well, I'll be real quick. I do think what you guys were touching on, you know, the cliche of hurt people, or if you wanted to make it more academic, we have these systemic, violence that gets passed down from generation, where you have, if you're abused or hurt, you tend to abuse and hurt people. It's tough to break that cycle, but I do think there are things the U.S. can do. We're the only country, the modern industrialized country, that has gun deaths at the level we do. So yes, but I don't think it's politically easy, and unfortunately I don't think we're.
And gun control, the criminals are just going to have the guns.
Okay, let's get the thoughts of my panel in London, Claire Muldoon and Stuart Fawcett. Good evening, you two. Nice to see you this evening. So what we know so far is that at around 6 p.m, of course, the gunman approached the sort of west entrance to the White House, went into a bag, opened fire on a Secret Service agent, was shot dead with 20 to 30 bullets coming his or her way. And he's now been said to have been tried to access the White House on multiple occasions previously. We've got a breaking line now as well from Fox News. Sorry to interject. Multiple sources have confirmed to Fox that the suspect accused of opening fire near the White House this evening has been identified as Nasir Best, a 21-year-old of Maryland. That's Nasir, N-A-S-I-R-E, and the surname is Best. Nasir Best, a 21-year-old of the state of Maryland. Maryland, of course, is the state that borders Washington, D.C. Claire, your assessment, please, on what we've just heard.
21-year-old, very, very early in age, a very young person. To be in control of a firearm is quite worrying. How did they get it, for a start? How were they radicalised? Was this a politically motivated attack? We know he was mentally unstable from what the reports we've been given so far. And I said to Alex in the studio here in London, well, you couldn't be sane to do what he did. And now we're told it's not his first attempt or their first attempt at this either. Clearly, everyone knows the President of the United States lives in the White House, so I would say it was a political attack aimed at getting at Donald Trump, whom we know did not attend the wedding of his son, Donald Jr., this weekend down in Palm Beach. And we know that he said that they were very close to getting a peace deal now in Iran. I don't think this is... Personally, I don't think this is a cell that's been activated by the IRGC, although we don't know. My gut reaction is that it's not, that he is someone like the same person that tried to do the White House Correspondents' Dinner a few weeks ago. It's just so much up in the air at the moment, Ben.
Claire,
we just don't know.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt again. I'm just getting some more detail. There is a suggestion that this guy, Nasir Best, was previously arrested in July last year for attempting to enter the White House complex. He had serious mental health issues. I think that would suggest, although we can't confirm for sure, that would suggest this isn't some sort of IRGC or politically motivated.
I completely agree and concur with that.
Again, unconfirmed reports, but many journalists now suggesting that, according to his online behaviour, he believed he was Jesus Christ. So that would go some way to explaining his mental condition. Stuart?
Yeah, I think when we look at this, when you take a step back and look, and we can all speculate about what motives may be, but let's look at what this person may have really considered the end outcome to have been, and that is that taking a firearm to one of the most secure places in the world was probably not going to end in a net positive result for their own health. So the outcome has been that they have died. And from the history that you've outlined there, Ben, that they've clearly been warned before. They were being watched. They'd approached the White House before, and approaching the White House with a firearm puts you in mind of their state of mind and what they were perhaps expecting to be the outcome for themselves.
Yeah, I have to say, as a Brit here in America, Claire, it is. I do feel safe. I've been saying all evening I have the perception of safety. I generally feel quite safe. However, just thinking about it, since Bev and I have been here since September. We had the White House Correspondents' shooting. We had the incident tonight. We had the National Guard soldier who was shot dead by the crazed Afghan. There was a guy shot outside my apartment a few weeks ago who had his face blown off. There was another guy shot outside my metro station 5 minutes after I left. And there have been multiple shootings. So I'm saying, although I feel safe, actually there have been a hell of a lot of shootings going on and people dying.
No, I think this is there's a direct correlation between mental health and in all of this, and I put it firmly at the ground of decriminalising drugs and Class B drugs especially. I think the weed that people are smoking now that they're getting that say they can is actually more pungent and more powerful than anything that was grown before. And if you start making things legal, then it's an open doorway. I think it's a gateway drug to taking harder, more dangerous drugs. And look at California, look at San Francisco, look at what's happening in Washington, D.C. as well. And you've often remarked, Ben, that you can't stand the stench of some of the streets when you walk down them. It's the same here in London. Is quite offensive, and it's really worrying because we know the impact that these drugs have on people. They give them episodes of psychosis. They give them bad mental health issues that will not be able to be managed nor get better. And for the fact that Nasir Best was known to the States, was known to the Special Forces, that's even worse. Why on earth, after being known, after a previous attempt, was he still able to have a gun?
Well, who knows? Maybe he wasn't. We don't know. We're just speculating. I assume he didn't have legal access to a gun.
Well, you would hope he didn't.
That now actually on screen. I think it's the Secret Service. That's where I was standing maybe an hour ago. It's the DEA, the DSS, the Secret Service, plotting something on the floor. I guess he didn't have legal access to a gun, judging by the fact he had a stay-away order from the White House. Hillary, we were just talking about the safety of America and gun crime, and you said, well, London has stabbings.
No, but I'm just wondering how many during that time. Be interesting to know how many stabbings London's had, and also you think about the amount of rapes that they've had in Sweden with all the illegal migrants that are there. But I think in general you're totally right. Although in my entire life in America, I've never experienced that crime. Obviously, you're living down in D.C. Now I live about 9.7 miles outside of D.C. and while there is crime there, I remember there was a robbery at a local bank. I've never been witness ever to any gun incidents. I did live in New York City for 2 years.
What is that on the floor there we're looking at? Is that blood? What does that look like?
Maybe blood.
It looks like a pool of something.
But if it was blood, they wouldn't be standing in it.
Or a manhole cover, potentially.
No,
law enforcement agencies, just yards from the White House, they're doing something or potentially looking at something on the ground. Nasir Best, this chap who has been shot and killed by Secret Service tonight, is from Maryland. Just describe the sort of geography of Maryland. He's allegedly from there.
Maryland. It's called the DMV. It's the greater DC area, Maryland and Virginia. So the District of Columbia, Maryland, Virginia. DMV are the suburbs. And the analogy for the English, actually, I always say where I live here. When I lived in England, I lived in Surrey, and I was outside of Woking. People know the Woking train station, actually specifically Woodham, Surrey. So I would say that it's like sort of Surrey, Kent, the home counties would be Essex, all the counties that are close around London. It's the same sort of geographical dispersion, and that you have the suburbs right close to the city, albeit obviously those are a little bit further out in the UK. But yes, I'm 9 miles away. And then what you find is that those suburbs are the suburbs where people are coming in to work in DC. So just like it's called the stockbroker belt sort of in the UK, likewise it is here. They're coming into DC. He was from Maryland. I don't know exactly where in Maryland. The most affluent county is a county called Montgomery County, which is very close in. He may have been from one of the other counties. I don't know which county he was from. We don't know yet much about his background at all. I don't think we've heard anything on that.
Yeah, nothing other than
21-year-old.
than speculation from journalists that he believed online he was Jesus Christ, but again, that's unconfirmed. But the Secret Service man, he has said he was previously emotionally disturbed, was the description, and he tried to previously gain access to the White House on a couple of occasions and had a so-called stay-away order, which I guess is an order to
well,
don't come
Ben,
near the White House.
you've mentioned that there was a shooting at your apartment. I've lived in D.C. for a bit. 2 years ago, I heard a really loud noise at like 3 a.m. I knew it was a gunshot just from what it sounded like. I went to the roof of my building, and I told Hillary this on break. I saw someone bleed out and die on the road. Police came quickly.
Goodness.
But gun violence is a big problem in the United States, and I said this while you were out on the ground reporting, but we have about 120 to 140 people die a day from gun violence in the U.S. That averages about one person every 11 to 12 minutes.
So is that from violence, or does that include accidents as well?
So it includes suicide.
I would say a lot is military suicide, veteran suicide.
But still, that we have a higher suicide rate than other countries because when someone thinks about committing suicide, it's a passing thought, and a gun makes it very easy for them to commit suicide. But I just would say there are things we can do about this. President Bill Clinton passed an assault weapons ban. After he passed the assault weapons ban, we saw a decrease in gun deaths. We're never going to be like a European or UK country where we have no guns, but I do think we can do a better job on this.
Interesting. But I guess the flip side of the argument is if you try and restrict guns or ban guns, then only the bad guys will have the guns.
The criminals will get them, no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit.
The stricter the gun controls, actually, the higher the gun crime
It's a long
in the
old
US.
conversation.
Except for in the UK.
Let's get the thoughts of Chief Intelligence Officer at Artorias, Stefano Rittendale. Stefano, good morning. Thanks for joining the Late Show Live on GB News. We're hearing, of course, that this chap has reportedly been named as Nasiah Best, a 21-year-old allegedly from Maryland. The Secret Service described him as emotionally disturbed. I guess the question is, you kind of have to be emotionally disturbed to think you're gaining anything from opening fire on Secret Service agents just yards from the West Wing of the White House.
Well, first, thank you so much for having me. And yes, I would agree 100% with that statement. I mean, if you were looking at an assassination attack or a plot seriously considered by a gunman to target the president, I think the last thing you would do is try to walk up to the White House, pull up a handgun, and shoot at Secret Service agents throughout the White House, which is the most defended piece of territory in the United States. And I think this just kind of highlights that this was somebody who was mentally disturbed. There's a lot of reports indicating kind of his own belief systems that kind of indicate that he's not really tied to either any known domestic or international terrorist organization, or this was a significant plot, but rather somebody who's trying to make a statement and probably try to use violence as a way to try to highlight himself and target probably the most powerful institution individual in the world. Investigators are clearly going to look more into this to just make sure and rule out anything else. But I think the initial reporting that we get, it just shows that was a mentally disturbed individual is not tied to any larger terrorist threat at the moment.
Can you just explain, Stefano, if the Secret Service says he tried to gain entry to the White House previously, they described him as emotionally disturbed. So just explain for British viewers, please, how did he obtain a weapon then to fire on Secret Service? How does that kind of thing happen in America? Just kind of explain the logistics and process of that, if you can.
Right. So, I mean, I would say that's going to be one of the key aspects of the investigation. But unfortunately, the United States is not that hard to achieve a weapons, either through straw purchases, basically buying a gun without any background check. It might have been from somebody of a family member of his. For example, a lot of your viewers might recall, for example, a lot of mass shootings, specifically done those by teenagers or younger adults or children even. And a lot of times the report comes that those guns came from family members in the homes, specifically the parents. And so that's going to be one of the key aspects of the investigation, to see where this gun came from and how this individual obtained it. Unfortunately, in the United States, we have a large arsenal of weapons. And so it's kind of easy to obtain it. And this individual, if he wanted to avoid any background checks, which more than likely he would have failed because of his past run-ins with the Secret Service and his attempt to breach the White House previously, he wouldn't have been able to legally purchase a gun anyways. And so as such, he probably obtained it illegally or through a family member or stole it. And that's how he's able to pull a handgun and shoot at the Secret Service.
Fox News is reporting that this situation with this guy, Nasiah Best, has been going on at least for pretty much a year, because they say that he was detained by Secret Service on June the 26th, 2025, last year, for flagging down agents and making threats, and again on July the 10th of 2025 last year for entering a restricted area. So whatever mental health episode he's been struggling with, it's continued for at least, well, as I said, pretty much 12 months, because he came back again tonight, opened fire, and this time, instead of being detained, quite rightly you have to say, because he opened fire, he's been shot dead.
Correct, and I think one of the other aspects that would be interesting to look at once we get for the reporting is when he was detained, it does look like he wasn't charged and prosecuted in any way, shape, or form. And I guess the argument would be made, why wasn't that the case if these were instances where he might have broken the law? Is this something that needs to be further looked into? Is this something where the Secret Service might have to continue to enhance some of these known individuals and how they interact and see if there's any additional threats? But it's important to note that this specific incident, it did not breach any security perimeter. When he pulled out the gun and started to open fire, where this event happened was exactly the first people who were supposed to respond, and their job was to respond. They responded, and very effectively. A lot of the videos that we got afterwards was showing and hearing the shooting quickly shows that this incident quickly and ended very, very quickly. The shooting was not long, drawn out. In fact, impacted multiple people. The Secret Service quickly neutralize the threat and happen in an area which is their responsibility to kind of be that first line of defense to protect the White House. So I think we have to be very cautious also in how we analyze and report this, although there's a lot of things that happened beforehand that needs to be looked at too. For example, his previous record and his ability to access a gun. During the event, when he did the shooting, the Secret Service did exactly what they're supposed to do and quickly neutralize the threat, as we now know.
Yeah, I guess the only remaining concern is the bystander who reportedly is still in a critical condition in hospital after getting caught up in the crossfire. The Secret Service say they're not sure whether the fire on the bystander came from their agents or maybe the gunman, Nasiah Best. That's still to be established, but that person, unfortunately, is still in hospital in a critical condition. I will say, those Secret Service guys, the entrance where this happened, it's not even an entrance, by the way, to viewers and listeners. It's not the entrance to the White House. It's the entrance to a long pavement, or a sidewalk as the Americans call it, and a road, which sometimes is, I mean, when I came here in September, normally that was open, but it's a pavement. It's a security block entrance to a pavement which leads down to another set of security gates, which you then begin to enter the White House. It's absolutely nowhere near the entrance to the White House grounds itself. It's pretty much the entrance to a pavement which leads you down there. And they are there every day, those Secret Service guys. I've become to know some of them by face. They say hello, they give a thumbs up, and they're great guys. And I will say, Stefano, just explain, I know the answer to this, but explain for our British viewers and listeners why the gunman was subject to 20 to 30 rounds to gunshots from Secret Service agents. Why do they keep firing like that? Because some people do say online, for example, when you have other incidents like this, they say, oh, why don't you just shoot him in the leg or the knee, as if it's some sort of Hollywood movie.
Exactly. I mean, somebody myself who was a veteran, when they're trained, we're trained to shoot center mass, which is basically, kind of this center area. Your goal is to neutralize the threat. That's the quickest way to neutralize the threat, shooting in center mass, and that's how they're trained and done it. As you said, and how the Secret Service is going to respond to a threat in this aspect is they have to train to neutralize them directly. As you pointed out very importantly, the area where the shooting happened is a tourist area. This is where a lot of people would go and interact. And so not only is the Secret Service concerned about the protection of the president and the White House, but also the people there and the loss of life and the civilian casualty that might entail. They're going to take the direct measure and drastic measures to neutralize the threat. All law enforcement in the United States, and frankly in many aspects around the world, are trained to do this. This individual was armed. The Secret Service has to react in a quick second. They don't have the time or the luxury to think, oh, I can do this action or I can de-escalate. This individual started to open fire. The Secret Service is trained, and as we've shown, quickly neutralize the threat. And as you pointed out, the individual who's injured, I think that's going to be part of the investigation is, was he injured by the gunman or the Secret Service? And maybe there's ways that this needs to be addressed and analyzed to see if there's other procedures that maybe the Secret Service needs to take into account to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. But I think from all aspects, the Secret Service did exactly what they were trained for and their job was, which was to neutralize the threat affecting the president, the White House, and the people around there.
Yeah, Well said. Stefano, thank you very much. Appreciate your company and contribution. Stefano Rittendale. Live pictures now. If you're just tuning into GB News and The Late Show Live, maybe you've been on a night out on your Saturday night and you're just catching this for the first time. The breaking news from Washington this evening is that a gunman has died outside the White House after being shot by Secret Service agents. The gunman opened fire first on an agent who we believe is fine and unscathed. The 21-year-old gunman has been named recently in the past few moments as a chap called Nasir Best. He was known to Secret Service for trying to gain access to the White House illegally on a couple of occasions previously, including in June and July 2025. He had a court order to stay away from the White House and the precincts and the grounds, and he of course violated that order this evening just before 6 p.m. when he approached the west entrance to the White House grounds and tried to open fire on a Secret Service agent. Sadly, a bystander, an innocent bystander who was just in the area at the time, was struck by gunfire. They are in hospital in a critical condition. Hillary, this guy reportedly, again unconfirmed, but Nasir Best, this 21-year-old from Maryland, allegedly, has been described by Secret Service as being emotionally disturbed, and some are suggesting that online he was describing himself as Jesus Christ.
Yes, and may I just interject one other thing? The bystander that unfortunately did receive a bullet, I believe he was 16 years old, which of course is tremendously sad, but that's what I read somewhere. Now with regard to this Nasir Best, yes, he thought of himself as Jesus, which is a little strange because, I mean, obviously Jesus really wasn't known in the Bible to take sort of gun action and go and try and shoot people, so it's a little bit strange. But yes, he thought that he was Jesus. We don't know all about his background yet. We don't have a lot of information on that. What we do know definitely is that he violated a court order, was not supposed to be in front of the White House, and he was known to the Secret Service to be obviously deranged. So I don't know whether they recognized him, but I think it was only when he initially let off a few rounds, and that's where we saw the footage of the ABC reporter who was there at the White House who had to duck. She was right there on air, and we heard many gunshots. Actually, being here in the GBNews studio, both Mally and I were on set. Ben sprinted because our studio here is just about 18th and L, and the White House is 17th and Pennsylvania. It was a few blocks. Ben sprinted down there. Mally and I were on set, and we could hear from the basement here, we could still hear all the sirens that were going on. So it was really quite dramatic. That was around just before 7. Of course, the actual gunshots were at 6. Actually, kudos to Ben for getting down there so quickly. You deserve a little medal for that, I think.
I've got long legs and I run fast.
And you still look smart in your suit.
Thank you. Mally, let's remind ourselves of that extraordinary video which we've been sharing at the start of the show this evening of the ABC journalist who was giving a live report into her broadcast network from the White House when she had to dive under a table after hearing the 20 to 30 shots rain out. Take a look at this.
That President Trump has said a deal is close, only for the two sides to remain far apart.
Extraordinary footage, Mally, and that video is doing some serious numbers online now, more than I think 5 or 6 million views on X alone.
Yeah, I mean, it's terrifying. And you know, as we were speculating, I joked that it could be a crazy person who thought they were God. Well, apparently is a crazy person.
You had said that, Mally said that when we didn't know anything, yes.
Is a crazy person who thought they were God. To me, this just shows you, though, the U.S., we need to do a better job when it comes to gun violence. And there is a connection to having stricter gun laws and less death. The top 10 states in the U.S. for firearm deaths, and this is counted by the CDC, 9 of them are Republican states. The safest states when it comes to gun violence deaths are blue states that have stricter gun laws. We do not have to live like this. We can make changes as a country and in our community to have less gun death. We are just choosing not to.
What about the mental health aspect? Because I will say, as a visitor to DC since September, the mental health situation here is very obvious. You will see half a dozen people with,
I mean, I think that's obvious.
With clear mental health problems talking to themselves. details. It happened in the supermarket today. There was a guy just walking around laughing at himself hilariously. It was obviously quite disturbing.
I think that's obviously a part of it. We got to have better mental health services for folks and make sure they don't get to the point where they're homeless and mentally ill and could get to that situation. But I would like to say other countries have mentally ill people too, and they don't have the gun violence we do. If it was mentally ill people that were causing the gun violence, other countries would have the U.S. gun violence problem. It's the guns.
Well, one of the things here is they've shut down all the mental institutions, a lot of them where people were sent, and those are no longer in existence, and that was there for generations, basically.
Yeah, and I know Claire Muldoon in London touched on it. We don't know if this guy tonight was, we're speculating about whether he smoked cannabis or not, but again, I will say, as an observation being in DC, it stinks.
The prevalence of drugs,
People are smoking cannabis everywhere in the city, day in, day out. Even in my apartment block, I'll get into the lift, you can tell somebody's just smoking a joint a few minutes beforehand because it's white box and it stinks.
Yeah, it is everywhere.
Claire Muldoon and Stuart Fawcett, I guess it's at times like these when we hear from Mali and the stats on gun deaths and so on that, it's a great thing. How lucky are we not to have guns? I mean, I'm a massive gun rights supporter here in the US, but that's because the horse has bolted and guns are everywhere. I think there's something like 6 guns to each American, but in the UK at least, yeah, I mean, thank goodness we don't have it. I suppose we have an issue with knives, but maybe not on the same scale.
I think too that we're really lucky not to have armed police as bobbies on the beat. I mean, we barely have them now either. I think that's another issue that needs to be addressed locally and domestically. But I think, for us to encounter the thefts, the rapes, the knife crime, the violence and even the football violence now, everything is escalating, Ben, because people are so polarised, people are become so divisive, and we other people all the time, constantly, and that's really not healthy. Society is crippled, it's polarised, for want of a better word, but we need to address the singular issues, and that is of mental health issues, drug issues and violence, and it all roots back to how you are together as a society, what builds a society. Well, a family builds a society, and we need to we need to take care of the people that we're allowing into the country. We need to sort it out. We really do need to get a grip on that, because we need assimilation. We need people being brought together. We need people understanding British values, even as arbitrary as queuing. It's as little as that. And not to have children start school that are wearing nappies, not to have children start school that can't even speak English, for heaven's sake. There is so much going on and so much to unpack even, that the parallels from gun crime in America, as you've said, you do support it over there because the horse has bolted. And God forbid we have anything like that happen in this country. And Stuart touched on it earlier about what we had in Dunblane, that massacre in Dunblane, and practically overnight our gun law was completely tightened, as still remains to this day. But we still have guns on the street. We still have shootings in Birmingham and in Clapham. So crime does still continue.
We just saw some shots from... sorry, Stuart, just 1 second before I come to you. We just saw a shot from our GBNews cameraman down on the scene there. The law enforcement agencies who are on the scene, the Secret Service, the FBI, the Drugs Enforcement Agency, the Diplomatic Protection Agency, they are all down there now, and they are looking at something on the floor now. That's on Pennsylvania Avenue, where Ben, my cameraman, is. We believe they're looking at some sort of projectile on the floor as part of the investigation and evidence. Possibly it's being described as copper in nature, in description. Could it be a bullet casing or something like that? We aren't sure just yet, but they are looking at that piece of area on the floor there on the road, Pennsylvania Avenue, maybe a couple of 100 feet from the White House entrance, as part of their evidence. We'll bring you more information on that as we get it. Stuart, I was going to say to you, Keir Starmer
We were going to be reporting this tonight before this breaking news came. Keir Starmer says the government is turning progress into results for working people. He says the plan is working. And in this article and this kind of speech he's written, he's talking about the fact that in the UK, homicides are down 10%. He was also talking about knife crime being down as well. So the government seems to think that Britain is getting safer, at least when it comes to violent crime.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the first major reforms that the Labour government brought into policing was the banning of zombie knives, and I think this is important to note about means, which is we can talk about lots of different motives, but the means in a lot of these violent attacks were these zombie knives, really large, quite unpleasant blades that could do quite a lot of damage, and they were banned with significant enforcement going into sort of searches, specific areas where people may be carrying those things, as well as amnesties as well. So I think it's important to talk about means. Claire touched earlier on about Dunblane, gun laws were tightened overnight. Now, Britain is a different country to America. America has a lot of law-abiding citizens who own firearms for own defence. It's a different cultural basis and legal basis as part of their constitution. But that changed very quickly in Britain. And that's perhaps why we talk about knife crime here a lot, as you've touched on, Ben. We don't necessarily talk about firearms as much. In fact, many firearms crimes can often be related to one small set of firearms when they look at ballistics. Whereas in the US, obviously, it's much more widespread because of that sort of grey market with firearms sometimes. But I think also what to note is here, and I'm not going to come out and say immigration is or is not a prime driver of crime, but illegal immigration is down 35% now in the UK because of measures that have been taken by the Home Office. So, these measures are now seeming to have an impact upon the statistics that we're beginning to hear.
Yeah. I'm not going to get into a row with you about illegal immigration, but for at least the Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, says he says homicides in this article that it was being released tonight, actually, for UK viewers. He says homicide is down at record lows since the 1970s. He also says knife crime is down 10% and more than 63,000 knives have been taken off the streets. Claire Muldoon.
Yeah, I don't know
where we want it, isn't it, Claire? It's where we all want it going.
It's where we want it going, but I don't trust the actual data that he's talking about. I really don't, because we don't feel.
Does it feel like that, Claire? That's
no,
the
exactly.
question.
That's what I was going to say, Ben. It doesn't feel as if that is the case. I mean, we've got stars saying that they can't wear watches. They're good watches in London. All the mobile phone thefts in London. Morgan McSweeney, case in point, had phones stolen. And it's all of this. It's all of these add-ons. And we do feel that we are maybe looking over our shoulder, or with a number of line bikes passing at speed, with balaclavaed youths and capped and hooded youths driving past in scooters and bikes at great haste. It really does unnerve you. And I don't believe for 1 minute that knife crime is down as much as he said he is, let alone homicide, because violent crime must be on the up. Perhaps people aren't dying of the result of the said crime as much. Good, well, hopefully that's a good thing as well. But the crime is still there, and violent crime is still there, and the number of young people committing crimes as well has gone down. It's staggering, absolutely staggering.
I'm not one to necessarily speak out about line bikes on pavement too often, even though they are extremely annoying. But I tend to trust this data and the data that we're being told here. I'd like it to be much greater. Measures seem to be taking an impact. But Hilary mentioned it earlier about fundamental family breakdown. I've wrote about it before on GBNews. And things like this are generational changes, where you have the sources of these incidents of crime and where it comes from socially. And things like this take a legislative agenda that takes time to impact, especially when you're talking about social cohesion and intervention. So just measures alone, it's very difficult to sort of turn that corner very quickly. But, you know, if knife crime and violent crime and even homicide has gone down 10%, that's definitely the way I want it. There are people alive today, or people who are safer because of measures that have taken impact, and that's the direction I want it to keep going.
Yeah, it's worth noting these pictures on your screen now from our cameraman, our GBNews cameraman, down on the scene on Pennsylvania Avenue. It's around 100 yards from the White House entrance. What is that, 300 odd feet? I made a guess of 300 feet a bit earlier when I was outside reporting. I think it's about 100 yards. They are looking apparently on the floor here at some sort of projectile, which could be, I don't know, bullet casing, something else. It's being described as copper in nature, but it just goes to show, my cameraman's made a great point, it just goes to show Hillary that this is 300 feet away from the entrance to the White House.
Yes.
How chaotic the gunfire must have been. 20 to 30 shots. We heard the shots ring out on that video from the ABC reporter giving her live hit a bit earlier. It's a surprise and a miracle, I'd say, that nobody else, apart from that poor youngster who's in a critical condition, has been hit in the crossfire. There's many, many people crossing Pennsylvania Avenue. It's a very busy part of DC. There's Starbucks there, there's all sorts of shops and cafes and food places. It's a miracle, I would say, as an observer in DC, that nobody else was hit.
You're absolutely right. The bystander was a 16-year-old, which is tremendously sad, but you're right. I mean, it's a very high traffic area. They've now closed down, though, Pennsylvania Avenue. That was after, back in the day, and Mally might remember the exact time, it was, I think, Tim, somebody who tried to blow up a building, was it in Knoxville? Where was the building?
Timothy McVeigh.
Timothy McVeigh. Sorry, Timothy McVeigh.
Oklahoma.
It's getting late. Oklahoma, very good. Yes, it's getting late. Timothy McVeigh, he tried to blow up a government building, and that was when they closed down the Pennsylvania Avenue. Used to have cars going right in front of the White House. They've closed that down, but of course the advantage with closing down the road in front of the White House there, the Pennsylvania Avenue, is that now that there isn't any vehicular traffic, a lot of pedestrian traffic. So to your point, Ben, yes, there's a lot of people, even at night, and this happened at 6 p.m. on a holiday weekend. A lot of tourists come to Washington, D.C. at this time. Actually, I think probably the saving grace was in England, when it rains, people still go out and they walk and they go about their business. In America, when Americans sing Land of the Free and Home of the Brave at the end of the national anthem, really not when there's half an inch of rain. Most people don't go out, and they won't go out. So there were way less people than there ever would have been. It kept the tourists away. If it had been a regular, and this is called Memorial Day weekend here in the United States, I know it's a bank holiday weekend in the UK, but a holiday weekend like Memorial Day weekend, it actually would have been packed. If he had pulled out that weapon, and to your point, if there had been the Secret Service response with the normal amount of people there, this could have been catastrophic.
Yeah, but just on an off point, I had a great walk in the rain today. I loved it.
Because you're English.
English.
I go out in this, and Americans think I'm nuts. I'll golf when it's 45 to 50 degrees here. Do you know almost no one goes out and golfs?
Yeah.
And I do, and it's empty. It's wonderful.
With your country, you could never leave the house if you didn't leave when it rains.
Yeah.
But Hillary's right. That area is a tourist trap. The tourists come up to see, because you can, as long as there's no security issues, sometimes they push the perimeter farther. But if there isn't, you can go right up to the gate and see the White House. It could have been much worse. I routinely take my dog, and we'll walk down from my apartment, do the lap around the White House, and come back up. And it is scary. If someone has a death wish and they want to run up on the White House and take shots, then they can do that, unfortunately. And Hillary, I know what you're talking about. That road used to be open, and cars could go by.
Avenue, yep.
There's a lot of talk that they want to try to open it up again to have that happen. But I think with the security, they're never going to do that.
With this tonight, I bet they won't. Yeah. And actually, when they did close it down, it really created log jams across DC, because it was a thoroughfare, and it was designed by Lafayette, the designer for Washington DC, as a thoroughfare that they never anticipated would ever be shut. So it really did affect the traffic pattern.
This guy, if you're just tuning into GB News, this chap who has been shot dead tonight by Secret Service agents after trying to, first of all, shoot them, has been named as 21-year-old Nasiah Best. He had previous encounters with law enforcement. Secret Service say that in June and July, on 2 separate occasions in 2025, he tried to gain access to the White House. He was given a court order previously telling him to stay away from the White House grounds. Of course, this evening, goes without saying, he broke that order, pulled out a gun and tried to kill Secret Service agents. They were firing 20 to 30 shots at Nasir Best. He died at a DC hospital a bit later on in the evening, and unfortunately the other additional bit of news is that a bystander, which we understand reportedly is a 16-year-old boy, he was shot in the crossfire. We can't confirm whether he was shot by Secret Service bullets or bullets coming from Nasir Best's weapon, but he's in hospital in a critical condition as it stands. Hillary, President Trump is in the White House as we speak. This show really tonight was meant to be focusing mainly, amongst other things, on the Iran situation, because the President held a call this evening with leaders of different Middle East states, UAE, Bahrain, Jordan, Saudi, etc. And we potentially are quite close to a deal. But I mean, does tonight's incident change anything on that front?
Actually, that's one thing that Melanie and I were discussing when you were sprinting down there, and when you were down there at the White House. That's one of the things that we were wondering. I don't think anybody knows the direct answer to that. What I would say is when the gunshots went off and all the sirens, again, we're only a few blocks away, when we could hear the sirens down here in the basement. So they obviously heard the sirens, they obviously heard the gunshots, obviously they were immediately informed of everything that was going on. So we're pretty certain that they would have obviously taken a break on the phone call, and they would have all been made sure that everybody was safe. Now, we don't know, nothing has come out of the White House. What I would say is I'm rather surprised there hasn't been a statement to the nation, because when there's a shooting at the White House, I'm surprised that President Trump hasn't said something yet. After the White House Correspondents' Dinner, he did speak very quickly. He had said he wanted that dinner to go on and continue. So I would bet they probably had at least a break in the meeting. We haven't heard any positive news. I'm kind of surprised he hasn't made an announcement.
Yeah, Manny, Trump, after the White House Correspondents' shooting, Trump went to the briefing room himself at the White House and gave a speech. I've just checked Truth Social. He's not said anything so far.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably there's the logistical issue of he's all tied up in conversations with other countries about what this potential Iran deal could be. And then the second thing, I think he probably doesn't want to go out and give a statement to the press, and he usually takes questions from the press, because they would ask about the shooting, but then they'd probably quickly ask about the Iran deal. And if everything isn't fully tied up, you don't want to jump out there. On the Iran deal itself, there's a lot of conflicting things on the internet, but it seems like it's a deal to get a deal. I think it looks like this deal is to potentially open up the strait. The Iranians would potentially get some sanctions relief. The strait would be opened up somewhat, but it looks like they would have larger discussions about the enriched uranium, but we'll see, because again, all of this is speculation.
Yes.
Okay, Claire and Stuart, let's just get a final word from you for tonight. Just 40 odd seconds each, if you don't mind. Claire, I'll start with you. Any final thoughts on what we've seen this evening?
I want to praise the response team of the police force and the information that they were able to garner very quickly and put out to everyone in the media and indeed globally. I think it was a swift, sharp response, which I really hoped would be replicated in this country when we have situations like this arising, because I felt it was completely dishonest of the government not to report usefully and honestly on the Nottingham and Southport murders. And, you know, I hope that the 16-year-old that's in hospital makes a full recovery. And I want to know what the issues were with Nasir Best. And I want to hear from President Trump, not only on his deal with Iran moving forward, but let's hope that hope and peace do prevail.
Yeah, indeed. Stuart, last word to you, mate.
Yeah, I think, Ben, we need to remind ourselves that when we have acts of violence against political targets, it's often not politicians, whilst they have been, whilst they have been assassinated in recent times, unfortunately. It's not only them that become the targets, it's often the people that are trying to protect them and have to put their life in the way to do so. So I think today's been a real lesson in that one.
Yeah, and we had lots of other topics to get through tonight.
We did.
There was, so much going on. Iran, fast track of EU membership.
Yep.
We had Nick Timothy writing to David Lammy, urging for transparency on migrant crimes. Foreigners must leave the US to apply for green cards now, apparently. There was also Farage promising tax-free overtime if he ever makes government. Hugh Edwards in talks for a tell-all interview with Channel 4. So all that to come tomorrow on The Late Show Live. But for now, this has been another evening of breaking news on The Late Show Live. We seem to be treated with these kind of big news stories on The Late Show Live on GBNews, so long may it continue. Let's just remind you of what we know so far tonight before we say goodnight to you. A suspected gunman has been shot and killed after he removed a weapon from his bag and began firing at Secret Service officers near the White House here in Washington, D.C. He's reportedly been identified as 21-year-old Nasiah Best and was known to officials for previously attempting to gain access to the White House. Another person, understood to be a bystander, has also been injured and is in a critical condition. For now, I'll see you tomorrow night from midnight. Thanks for your company, sweet dreams, enjoy your Sunday, and I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello there, a very good morning to you. This is your latest GB News weather updates provided by the Met Office. The exceptional heat is continuing to build throughout this bank holiday Monday. Whilst there is a front lingering across the far northwest, for most of us it's this area of high pressure that is in charge and allowing day-on-day heating to really get those temperatures going. And widespread clear blue skies across much of England and Wales already to start off the day, and that sunshine will spread into parts of southern Scotland, areas of Northern Ireland as we head into the afternoon as well. UV levels are very high at the moment, so do be wary if you are heading outside for prolonged periods of time. That sunscreen will be necessary, and the pollen levels are also picking up as well, so a warning for hay fever sufferers also. Our top temperatures of the day likely to be across the southeast of England, around 31 degrees Celsius. Quite rare to be seeing those values at this time of the year. Coastal regions may be a little cooler, but remember that sea surface temperatures are quite still low at this time of the year, so watch out for some cold water shock. The temperatures, though, much more broadly closer towards average for the time of year in the far northwest of Scotland, where cloud is going to linger throughout today, and we may see some outbreaks of rain across the Highlands, over towards the Outer Hebrides and the Northern Isles throughout the day and into the overnight period as well. Elsewhere, tonight promises quite widespread clear skies and very little in the way of cloud around. For most of us, it will be quite a warm night. Some towns and cities holding up around 16 to 18 degrees Celsius, so feeling quite difficult for sleeping in places. Our frontal rain in the north will continue right throughout Bank Holiday Monday, only very slowly easing later on in the day. But for most of us, it is wall-to-wall blue sunshine once again. And that extra sunshine is just going to allow those temperatures to climb even further. Potential for 33 degrees Celsius around the southeast, maybe even a touch higher locally. That has the potential to bring us our hottest bank holiday on record and also our hottest day in May on record. Quite exceptional indeed. And temperatures only slowly decreasing this week.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
5 hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates,
5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5.
You got me.